Good morning. Good morning, Facebook friends. Good morning, citizens of the planet and of America. Thank you for joining us today for this special day-long program of Inaugurate the Resistance. Yesterday, we saw the inauguration of the 45th President of the United States, Donald Trump, that many people cannot still quite get our hands around. The most unpopular and untrusted president in, at least in modern history, in the history of polling, whose polling numbers yesterday were actually down to a 32% approval rate. But a president who very much represents the failure of the two-party system. This is not simply a problem of a Republican victory, but rather a failure of the both predatory political parties and a rejection of this political system. So I am really honored today to be opening up this program with Ajamu Baraka, my esteemed running mate in the presidential election and renowned human rights advocate. And we're here to basically frame today's discussion of how did we get here? Where exactly are we? And how do we go forward from here? Let me turn it over to you, Jama, for a couple opening comments.
Thank you, Jill. And it's really a pleasure to be able to join you this morning in this very important conversation, a conversation that will take place for the entire day as we try to dig deep and get a sense of how we got here, the meaning of this current moment, and as you said, how do we go forward? And that's very important because, you know, there has not been the kind of critical, analytical work that one would think we should have been engaged in to try to understand where we are today and what we need to do. I think that we've been in a bit of a reactive mode to the Trump victory. But let today be the beginning of that process of us really giving serious thought, serious analysis to how we respond in an effective way that will result in us strengthening our oppositional potential and providing the kind of vision forward that we need to create here in this country among the Green Party activists. And among all who are concerned about empire and its impact on the entire world. So I'm looking forward to this day-long conversation, Jill.
Likewise. And I have to say that yesterday out on the street, I actually found it extremely encouraging, empowering, and quite surprising that there was not simply a knee-jerk reaction going on, at least in the areas where I was around Franklin Park and McPherson Square, which were really kind of the center of many of the protests. And it was actually kind of gratifying to see that people were not knee-jerking to this, you know, oh, we got to get the Democrats back in power. There was really a very deep sense of we have a big system problem here. We have a crisis of our economy, our ecology, peace and security, and especially of our democracy. And people were not, they didn't have sort of simple, superficial solutions. There was an incredible hunger out on the street for deep conversation. And I think it's really very exciting that we can have so many of these activists and deeply committed revolutionaries joining us today to share their work. And I want to share one thought in particular that I found really important just in my own thinking about what's going on, and that is to remember back to previous eras and whether it was, you know, the struggle against slavery or the struggle against Jim Crow or against lynchings, the bravery of the dreamers who dared to actually stand up and, you know, with incredible courage and fight against deportations. It's remembering back to the era of Richard Nixon, one of the most repressive and corrupt presidents in our history. It's important to remember what we accomplished. We brought the troops home from Vietnam. We passed the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act. We enacted the Environmental Protection Agency. We got women's right to choose from a very conservative Supreme Court. We advanced workers' rights and safety by establishing OSHA. There's so much that we did because we were truly mobilized. Why were we mobilized? It had a lot to do with the fact that our brothers, especially our brothers of color, were being sent to die in Vietnam. Our lives were on the line. And I think right now there's a great awareness that our lives again are on the line, and that is really triggering a very deep kind of involvement and a deep mobilization and a deep commitment to keep organizing. It's not enough to mobilize for one demonstration and then the next. It's really important for us, as you said, to go deep here and to organize in an enduring way. And for so many of us, you know, it must mean political, as Frederick Douglass said. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has and it never will. We must be that demand, and we must bring that demand into the halls of power.
You know, Jill, you're absolutely right. And one of the things that we have to acknowledge when we talk about and look at what happened during the era of the Vietnam War and the upsurge of social movements in the 1960s and 1970s is that we were in fact at a different level of organization and a different level of consciousness. And so saying that means that we have to look and with a very critical and sober lens at where we are today in terms of our level of organization and our level of consciousness. And we have to conclude that we have a crisis. That not only do we have a crisis of democracy, a crisis of the economy, we have a crisis of the opposition, a crisis of the left. And so I'm glad to see that more and more people are understanding that we have to, in fact, address those internal issues if we are going to be able to go forward effectively. You know, this terrain of consciousness and this terrain of organization represents the two areas that we have to really focus in on as we go forward, because basically without us understanding the shift in consciousness that took place between the 1970s and today, then we can be easily misled into believing that we have a baseline level of understanding that's going to be able to serve as the basis for us going forward in an effective way. I happen to be of the opinion that, you know, even among progressives and even among the so-called left, there's been a precipitous move to the right. And we've got to, I think, recognize that and figure out how we can penetrate that and to reverse that. Because of that, then we'll find ourselves being easily misled by the propagandists of the state and even the propagandists of the Democratic Party. We've got to move from anti-Trumpism to a more critical anti-system space, if you will.
Exactly, against the whole predatory political system that got us here. And one of the, compelling little factoids about that is the fact that, according to polls, most voters for Donald Trump were not actually motivated by supporting Donald Trump, but rather by resisting Hillary Clinton. And the legacy of the Democratic Party with its, centrist neoliberalism, its support for Wall Street, its creation, essentially, of the Wall Street crash, the deregulation of Wall Street, the exporting of our jobs, and the promotion of free trade agreements, and so on. So it really is that time, for us to stand up and stand together. And I'll just, note that both Ajamu and I are very committed to continuing this movement building, to continue party building, to help support people who are fighting at the local level, both the social movements as well as those who are challenging in the halls of power, to support both candidates and new Green Party chapters. This is very much a political fight, and the more that we are unified, the stronger we're going to be, and the sooner we are going to turn this around. Any final comments, Ajamu, before we sign off? People will be hearing from each of us as we continue through this day, but your closing comments?
Well, I'm glad that we are starting this conversation. We were just getting warm, but we have time constraints. I'm so glad that you mentioned the term neoliberalism, because that, again, helps to move us from this notion of anti-Trumpism to a more sophisticated understanding of what we need to begin to confront and dismantle as we go forward. So we're going to continue to talk, to struggle, to analyze critically, and to build the kind of resistance we have to build in order to build the new world that we know has to be constructed. So it's been a pleasure to be with you this morning again, Jill. We're going to do this more as we go forward and build this opposition. And I hope that our listeners and viewers get a lot from the conversations that will be unfolding through the course of this day.
Thank you, Ajamu, and I'll just close saying that we hope this is the beginning of that ongoing conversation. We hope to be able to use this channel, the Green News Network, to continue to lift up and build that opposition and that power for transformation. And I'll just end with Alice Walker's, paraphrasing Alice Walker, who said that the biggest way people give up power is by not knowing we have it to start with. We have it, and we're going to use it. Stay tuned. Thanks so much.
But strength overcomes. Courage of man, we've never found none.
When all movements are visionary, are courageous, are connected, we can fight these injustices. We can tear down their systems of oppression. Because remember, it will be all of us, or it will be none of us.
I'm Daryl Moak. I am the chair of the DC State Green Party and national co-chair, one of the national co-chairs of the U.S. Green Party. And I'm very excited to be here and glad to be a part of this progressive movement, this new progressive movement that is going to be the way that we make change.
We're here at Occupy Inauguration in Malcolm X Park in Washington, D.C. on the day that Donald Trump has been inaugurated president. Can you give us your thoughts about what you're planning to do as a member of the D.C. Green DC Greens, the DC statehood Greens, to resist Trump and the oligarchy?
Well, I'm actually also a part of the National Steering Committee for the United States Green Party, and so collectively the party is going to continue to push our agenda to make sure that we are addressing the issues that our communities need. We need to make sure folks are able to eat, able to have good housing, that they're able to access the basic human rights and civil rights. We're going to continue to make sure that we are pushing our government and holding them accountable to make sure that the legislation that we're passing is for people and not for profit, and that we're working very hard to make sure that what we need is actually what's happening.
Okay, and so what are you planning to do today on Inauguration Day?
Today we're here for the rally, Occupy Inauguration. There's a march that's also going on, and folks are going to march all the way down towards the Capitol, and so there's going to continue to be another rally at that point as well, and there are going to be a series of other resistance efforts that are happening all around the nation's capital, and we're going to continue doing these efforts throughout the years that we're coming. And so one of the things that's important is that we remind people that this is not an 8-year process or a 4-year process. This is 2 years. 2 years for you to organize, to get active, to get out, to vote, so that we can change the nature of the government incrementally. So we've got 2 years to build up a base to make change and elect some good folks to Congress that can counteract some of the domestic terrorism that will come from this administration.
Thank you. So this is Julie Verghese for the Green News Network, live at the Occupy Inauguration. Thank you.
This is what democracy looks like. And this is what the future looks like. And we say, we do not consent, not my president.
Yeah.
Say that with me. We do not consent, not my president. We do not consent to a future of war, endless war and austerity, of Wall Street fraud, of endless student debt, of mass incarceration, of the security state and surveillance. We do not consent to an environment and a climate in meltdown that is unraveling before our eyes. We do not consent to the oppression of women and the LGBTQ community. We do not consent to the deportation of immigrants who in large measure are refugees from the very policies of the United States that has driven them here to start with. Between NAFTA, between our war on drugs, between the overturning of democracies, the support for the coup in Honduras. This is what has driven so many millions of refugees to this country, only to be criminalized, to be detained, to be night raided. We are standing up to say no to all of that. We are standing up to say yes to an America and a world that works for all of us.
Hell yeah.
It's important not to let them make us take our eyes off the prize. They are trying to put us purely into defensive mode. We need to be in offensive mode. We are standing up and fighting. We will not go away, but we're not just fighting back, we are fighting forward for the future that we deserve. What produced Donald Trump to start with? It's important to remember, Donald Trump did not come out of nowhere. In fact, polls showed over and over that the majority of Donald Trump's voters were not voting for him. They were actually voting against Hillary Clinton and the track record of the Democrats. So it is very much a bipartisan problem. And you will notice there is a massive effort going on, sort of a public relations campaign to hijack the opposition to Donald Trump and label it Democratic. If we do that, we are just going to keep driving the economic austerity and despair that is producing right-wing extremism all over the world. which is a response to globalization, to the offshoring of jobs, to the likes of the global trade agreements like NAFTA, like the WTO, like the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and the Transatlantic Trade. This is what we need to stand up against, and against both political parties that are being funded by the predatory banks, by the fossil fuel giants, by the war profiteers and the insurance companies and the usual suspects. It's really important for us to remember where the power comes from. The power comes from us. That power is right here today, and it is growing stronger. We are out of time.
That's right.
We are out of time.
True.
It's time for us to stand up for the future that we deserve. It's time to stand up and own the power that we actually do have. And I want to encourage you right now, keep doing what you're doing. And can we please give a big shout out to Occupy Inauguration for this wonderful work, for standing up amidst this madness and not just knee-jerking to the idea, oh, Trump is bad, so therefore let's just go back to the Democrats, which is the message that's getting played out here on a lot of parts. We need to stand up. Thank you to Students Against Sweatshops, who really understand this as well. Thank you to Veterans for Peace, who's been leading the charge for us all. Thank you for your sacrifice, your double sacrifice and service. We do have the power. We the people are rising up. We have never faced such a mockery of democracy as this president and his cabinet represents, but we have never faced such an incredibly embattled president. At the outset, entering office with an approval rating of 35%, a record-setting rate of disapproval. At the same time that he is offending world leaders and national leaders and virtually everyone, and his cabinet members laid bare to so many Trump supporters who thought they were getting a populist president. No, this is actually the billionaires' president, the president for the bigots and the billionaires and the blowhards. His cabinet represents some, $11 billion among the cabinet members alone. In a world where 8 billionaires now have the wealth and resources of half of humanity, we do not want to be a government of, by, and for the billionaires. The lobbyists already have too much power. Donald Trump is making lobbyists unnecessary. He's putting the corporations in charge of our government, in charge of our public resources, our schools, our climate. We say, we do not consent, not my president. We do not consent, not my president. One more, we do not consent, not my president. Thank you all so much. Keep fighting. We are democracy and the future. Thank you.
Hey everybody, how you doing? My name is Salon Lerner. I am a musician from New York City. But today, I am here with the Green Party, and I just need to do anything possible, anything humanly possible to be part of what's happening with all these amazing people behind me, and to use my music and my abilities and my experience towards something much more fruitful, much more productive for humanity. And that's why I'm here. I want to be a part of something much bigger than what I've done, and just lend my abilities and my efforts and everything that I have to offer for something much greater, like I said. So I'm happy to be here, and wish you all peace.
So I'm Vanessa, and I'm here to say don't give up, because I understand right now is a hard time for women and people of color with the hate rhetoric that has been flooding our lives at the moment. And I think it's important to remember to find people that are with you, that stand by you, and realize that you exist and I exist, and don't give up, because it's going to be okay.
Hey everyone, Ed Higgins. I am an activist. I am also the founder of Activate Now Network.
I am here to support everyone. This is not about me, this is about the movement. I have been supporting our powerful indigenous brothers and sisters up at Standing Rock for the past 3 months, as well as traveled around the country the past 8 months because fuck false democracy. And that's who I am in a nutshell. So, love you guys.
Folks, my name is David Cobb, and I am a straight-up revolutionary. I think it's important that we actually give ourselves permission to say it, so I'm going to say it again. My name is David Cobb. I am a straight-up revolutionary. I'm a revolutionary because I know we cannot modify a white supremacist capitalist system. I'm a revolutionary because I know we have to restructure this society. I'm a revolutionary because I know that if we do not get a handle on the social, political, and economic institutions, they are going to destroy the planet that we depend upon for life itself. How am I doing? And for the FBI agents and the CIA folk in the crowd, I am a non-violent revolutionary. And I am saying that for 2 reasons. Number one, because as a matter of practical tactics, I don't think that we can win a violent revolution today. Those days are past. Even if you wanted to do it, it's impossible because the state has such a means of surveillance, such a means of raw, naked power that it simply does not work anymore. But I'm also going to go a little deeper and tell you I am a nonviolent revolutionary because my mama raised me that way. Because my mama taught me that if you want to live in a peaceful world, you got to act peacefully. If you want to end in a peaceful place, you got to conduct yourself that way. You see, that means can never justify the ends because the means are the ends in the making. See, I want to live in a peaceful, just, democratic, and ecologically sustainable society. How about you? We are a movement that is growing, and I want to invite each and every one of you sincerely to please consider joining the Green Party. Join the Green Party at the local level, at the state level, at the national level. Join the Green Party because we aspire to be the electoral arm for the growing movements for peace, justice, democracy, and ecology in this country. See, we aspire to that, but we can't really be that for real unless you, people in the movement, join it and make it happen. How many people are in the Green Party right now? Be straight up. All right, Green Party in the house. Those of you who didn't raise your hands, we're not mad at you, but we're getting impatient with you. So we're going to invite you right now, www.gp.org. Join the Green Party. Register in the Green Party, because when you register green, you're voting for peace every day. When you register green, you're voting for ecological sustainability every day. Thank you, sister. When you register green, you are joining a non-violent revolutionary movement. Thank you so much. Peace.
All right, so let's give it up for Jill Stein and David Cobb.
Howdy folks, David Cobb here, coming back live to you from Occupy the Resistance, Inaugurate the Resistance. So I'm David Cobb. I'm joined by my colleagues and comrades Gloria Matera, Jerome Scott in studio, and Ajamu Baraka is back with us via Skype. This session, from neoliberalism to neo-fascism, the rise of the global right and what that actually means. So we're going to try in 20 minutes to break that down and actually go deep. And I'm going to start by asking Gloria to give us a quick definition in common sense terms about neoliberalism, neo-fascism. What do those words mean?
Great. Thank you, David. Hi, everyone out there. Thanks for being here. So a lot of people use the term neoliberalism. We're seeing signs out at protests about that. And what are we talking about? Basically talking about the free market, right? Let the free market reign. It's about corporations. It's about giving them the freedom over the people. And that is something that Reagan and Margaret Thatcher really started out. It's about globalization. It's like, let's exploit cheap labor in other countries, create the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, for rich countries to give loans to poor countries so they can control what goes on in those countries. And that is, rather than giving the commons to the people here in the United States, as an example, they will take corporations, with the help of government, will take the public sector services that are important to all of us, housing, healthcare, education, and use that to subsidize the corporations and how they continue to make money. And so that's kind of what neoliberalism is about, certainly what it's about here in the United States. In terms of neo-fascism, in some ways there's a lot of connection there, but that is kind of playing on people's fears of who's different, our external enemies in other countries, our internal, quote-unquote, enemies, people that are immigrants, Muslims, people having different religion, people being different shades, than the people that are in control. And we can hear that in the kinds of things Donald Trump talks about. Build the wall to keep the Mexicans out, register the Muslims, close our borders. And that kind of gets people in this isolationist type of feeling, America is unique, America is better than any other country, therefore the American people, and how do we define that, are better than anybody else. And it's also a crackdown on our civil liberties, those of us living here, as an excuse to say we have to protect our people from the outside and the inside enemies. And so I hope that that gives a little bit of a description, David, about neoliberalism in its real form, neo-fascism in its real form, and I'm looking forward to talking about what the alternative, because when Margaret Thatcher would say there is no alternative, there is an alternative, and we are here to talk about that, and we are here, more importantly, to do that.
Fantastic. Thank you, Gloria. So, Joan, I want to turn to you now, because you have written extensively that the neoliberalism of Bill Clinton and Barack Obama and the entire Democratic Party literally created and paved the way for the neo-fascism of Donald Trump and the Republican Party today. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Well, I mean, there are two aspects to that. Of course, there are the economic contradictions that were created by neoliberalism, the impact of neoliberal policies on working people and the poor in the U.S. and really globally, but we look at the U.S. for now. But the other aspect of that, and the part that I think that I really focus in on during both the Clinton administration, but primarily during the Obama administration, is the structure of authoritarianism, the strengthening of the repressive apparatus. This serves as a foundation for the bourgeoisie to be able to hold power, to use the power of the state to resist any efforts on the part of the people to, in fact, resist neoliberal capitalism. And that process took place under both Democratic administrations, and particularly under the Obama administration. So when we look at some of the behavior aspects of so-called neo-fascism, we've got to come back and take a look at the important components, which are the role of the state and the class configurations that really make up the heart of a fascist upsurge. So for me, the kinds of moves made by the Obama administration in terms of expanding the power of the state, using the National Defense Authorization Act to, in fact, kill U.S. citizens, to put in place a truth commission, if you will, within the State Department, to strengthen the ability of the state to intimidate free speech by prosecuting whistleblowers, journalists. These are all were components, and very important components, that were put in place under a so-called liberal Democrat that I think will be, fully utilized by the incoming Trump authoritarian administration. So there's a direct connection there. And that, we're not even going to talk about mass incarceration, 3 strikes you're out. and to Clinton.
We will later today, Jamu, but I want to now turn to Jerome, because you've really set us up from economics and politics and talking about the state. I want to go deeper with you, Jerome, and ask you, because you have written that capitalism itself as an economic system is evolving, morphing, and changing from a system of mere contradiction to actual antagonism in an open political way. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, a couple of things. First of all, let me say I'm really happy to be here, and I'm losing my mic. I'm really happy to be here, and I'm happy to be able to address this critical question. The number one thing is I think we have to understand how capitalism in America has worked and what its relationship has been to the state, or what we call this democratic state. You know, the first thing that we must understand, which I'm sure we all are clear on, is that the relationship between workers and capital has always been one of these mutual relationships. We work for the capitalists, they pay us a salary or wage, and we're able to then buy back some of the commodities that are produced out there in the open market. It's supposed to be a market society. What's happening is, and you know, I experienced this firsthand because I worked in a factory, an auto factory in Detroit, and I saw, you know, this process began. You know, it began with, you know, technology that was labor enhancing. You know, it would help us do our work, help us get production up, help us be more productive. But it would need us in order to do the work, the workers. And that relationship between workers and capital have always been the basis of how capitalism has worked. With the introduction of technology that not only aids workers but replaces them, you know, labor replacing technology, what that means is we're beginning the process of eliminating one side of the relationship, which means that the relationship can no longer work. If you don't have workers that are getting paid and able to go out and buy the commodities that are produced, this society is going to grind to a halt. Capitalism is a a consumer society, and the United States capitalism is the biggest consumer society. And if you take out, you know, say 20% even of the consumers, because the technology has advanced to the point where they don't need 20% of the workers, and we can still produce more and more commodities with the machines, with technology, then what you're doing is taking out 20% of the population who could buy. Just think about that. If you extract 20% of the population that can buy the goods and services here in the United States, we're going to bring this whole economy to a halt. You know, and so that's what's happening with technology, and it's causing capitalism to be in this moment of transition. And the main transition is that it has to go from being a society that's based on the distribution of commodities by paying people and them paying for those commodities, to trying to figure out how do we distribute this vast number of commodities without people having money.
So, Jerome, you've literally set up the question that Gloria was asking, and that is, what is the transition? What is it that we actually want? If it's not this capitalist system based on exploiting workers for which you pay money to the workers, if workers aren't needed anymore, what is it that we're going towards? Gloria?
I would say concretely, let's look at what we need as a people and the species living on this earth and the earth itself, right, before we even put any labels, although I'm not afraid to say socialism. But I want to say, we want people to have health. It's about healthcare justice. It's about all the basic needs. It's equality. It's treating everyone equally with respect. It's people having meaningful work for people who can work and want to work, and for people who cannot, for whatever reason that is, that there is an income, that there is a way to sustain what's in life. And then I'm listening to Jerome when he's talking about technology. The plan, I think, was always that as we can automate and take away those kind of grueling, really physically taxing jobs away from a human being, that they would have time and resources to enjoy other things in life, family, intellectual pursuits, giving back to their community. If all those things kind of look at that together, that's the kind of society we're looking at, where we are sustainable, we are not taking the resources as we have been doing from this planet, and we have not been dominating people in other countries or people that are different than the people who are ruling at the moment. That's the kind of society I think that as a Green Party and as other social activists in the movement are striving, fighting, and struggling for.
Jamu, I want to kick to you really quickly, because you talk about the state, and the capitalist state is one thing, but you ran for Vice President of the United States on the Green Party ticket, attempting to engage with the state. Is it just inherently contradictory, or do you see a path forward of actually taking the state and using it to transition the way that Gloria is describing?
I think that being able to have some nominal control of the state as an instrument for a transformation, I think theoretically is grounded. But we can't have any illusions about that. We said during the campaign that even if Jill and I won, we saw that as the beginning point and that an end point. That basically the entrenched powers of capital is infused throughout the entire society and definitely throughout the entire state. So that has to be one component of a broader strategy. Understanding that in the end, though, the capitalist state it has to be dismantled if we're going to go forward. Let me say one other real quick thing. I think both Gloria and Jerome laid out the fact that basically the labor capital contradiction has now been expanded to
Jerome.
Yeah, I think it's really important to look at what's happening today. One of the main problems that I think we have to deal with is this process toward the merging of the state with the corporations. If you look at it, particularly if you look at this new cabinet, with all these billionaires, with all these generals, with all these Southerners, you begin to realize that they're trying to consolidate this merger between corporations and the state. And what that means is that as opposed to the state doing the bidding of the people, the state is going to be directly doing the bidding of the corporations. And that, to me, is the formula for fascism in this country. And so that's what we really got to begin to look at, to teach each other about, to mobilize and begin to understand that that's a reality that we cannot survive.
And that level of antagonism, folks, is what we're going to be using the Green News Network to not only expose, but we're also going to be going deeper, because I want to remind you that this is the beginning of the Green News Network. We are controlling and taking over the institutions in which we live. I hope that the Green Party can be the electoral arm of these growing movements to resist neo-fascism and blatant fascism, because Mussolini, the great fascist dictator and philosopher, said explicitly fascism more correctly should be called corporatism, because it is the effort to merge the military might of the nation state with the economic might of the nation state. And he thought that was a good thing, right? He was not he did not ashamed of it. He was a defender of it. Just as Jamu Baraka calls us to defend, what do you call it, socialism, communism, economic democracy? At the end of the day, the question is, who is in charge of making the decisions of how our society operates? I believe that it's we the people. I believe that we have to have a collective communitarian process by which we make our social, political, economic decisions in this country. I would like the Green Party to be the electoral arm of that effort, and I'm going to ask Jerome if you will come back onto the the Green News Network go deeper on your experiences. We didn't even get to talk about the Detroit Revolutionary Union movement. We didn't get to talk about the League of Revolutionary Black Workers. Gloria, we didn't get to talk about the Green New Deal. So I'm going to ask both of you to come on to my show on the Green News Network on Mondays at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. Remember, Ajamu has a show on Thursday called Voices from the Margin. Jill has shows. Here's the thing, y'all. I'm going to end with this. We can't just hate the corporate media. We have to become the media. We can't just hate the capitalists who have taken control of the political parties. We have to create new institutions that work for us all. So I want to thank you so much. Through the course of the day, we got 7 hours of conversation like this coming your way. We're getting larger, stronger, and better organized every day. Can't stop, won't stop. Peace.
Hi, this is Steve Grumbine, founder of Real Progressives.
Hi, I'm Tetsu Keita, Real Progressives. We're here on the Inauguration Day. We're here to promote a progressive agenda to stand against tyranny and fascism, no matter who it comes from.
Real Progressives is united to create an environment, a hub, if you will, ground zero of the progressive movement. We are citizens media, we are education, we are activism, and we develop policies around the progressive movement to help facilitate things like Jill Stein's plan and Bernie Sanders' plan.
Right. We're here to express solidarity with Occupy Inauguration. Thank you for the many groups who have joined us today, and we hope to work with you tomorrow and the day after to promote these agendas. Thank you so much.
In solidarity, folks, in solidarity.
Hi, my name is Ursula Rosum, and I am the Secretary of the Green Party of New York and also on the Young Greens U.S. Steering Committee. And today we are talking with Brian Jones as part of our Inaugurate the Resistance broadcast. And we're going to be talking with Brian about public education in the age of Trump. And Brian, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So I'm not sure how well our audience across the country and around the world knows you. So could you just introduce yourself briefly?
Sure. I am a public school teacher here in New York City who is now working on a doctorate in urban education. I've been in the field of education for, I think, about 14 years at this point. And in 2014, I was the Green Party's candidate for lieutenant governor of the state of New York.
And you were a great lieutenant governor candidate. Thank you for doing that. So let's jump right in. So I have a couple of questions first about Betsy DeVos, Trump's pick for Secretary of Education. And she's considered to be extremely hostile towards public education. So can you tell us a little bit about Betsy DeVos and about some of the major battles that you expect to shape up under the Trump administration? And really, how you think, how we can fight back?
Okay, well, Betsy DeVos, as you say, is widely considered to be a frightening pick for Secretary of Education for so many reasons, but I will just tick off some that your listeners and viewers may or may not have heard. In the first place, we are talking about somebody who is a billionaire heiress who is an anti-gay bigot and a right-wing political donor who's going to be in charge of the nation's public schools. She's assuming this post as somebody who never went to public school herself, did not send her children to public school, and has never worked in a public school. Her entire qualifications are, as what Donald Trump says, she's an education advocate, which really means that she's somebody who has used her wealth, and really her entire career in education is about destroying public education. In her home state of Michigan, she spent millions of dollars promoting competition and choice among schools through privatized charter schools. 80% of the charter schools in Michigan are for-profit charter schools, and vouchers. The idea being that instead of pooling taxpayer money to support a system of public schools that are available to everybody for no fee, instead you give people as a kind of rebate back those tax dollars, and they carry those dollars to the school of their choice. Unfortunately, she is really committed to the idea that instead of a public school system, we need a kind of privatized, competitive system of schooling. And that's why she's been pushing vouchers. In fact, she spent millions on a ballot initiative in Michigan to put it before the voters. And on several occasions, the voters of Michigan, and by the way, and other states, have soundly rejected the proposition. In the last instance, they rejected it in Michigan by a margin of 2-1. So this agenda is highly problematic for all kinds of reasons that we can discuss. But this is the person who is elevating right now to the national stage.
So are you saying that you expect some of the big battles to be around school vouchers, or what are some of the other fights that you expect unions and education activists to take up if DeVos, is ends up being education secretary?
It's not clear to me what her priority on day number one will be. I think we have to see how she sees the landscape and what she decides to push on. But everything about what I've just said is part of what could be in play. That is ripping up public schools and pushing further charter schools and vouchers. And for example, in Michigan, she has promoted legislation that removes accountability and removes oversight from for-profit charter schools. So several observers have described it as a Wild West, where basically there's no rules. Like people can just do whatever they want. So we've seen the proliferation of just kind of hucksterism and doing a sales job and collecting the money on the other side. And the children are the worst for it. A year-long investigation by the Detroit Free Press basically concluded that the state of Michigan had spent $1 billion on these privatization schemes and had little to and the children had little to show for it. Meanwhile, people had lined their pockets, including nepotism and all kinds of things. Another thing that may come up is that, in part, of course, there are people who favor privatization for straight up profit. Straight up, they want to make money off of schools. They want to take these taxpayer dollars and put them into private pockets. But that's not everybody. And there's another angle of the privatization movement that she also represents, which is the Christian right. That is, people who don't believe in the public schools because they see them as a secularizing force, as a separation of church and state, which they oppose. And she has repeated these themes in interviews and said that part of her work in education and breaking up the public school system is to make more space for religious education, that this is going to, it's part of bringing in God's kingdom, is breaking up the public schools and making room for religious instruction. She sent her children to Christian schools. And, this family that she comes from is a family that has for years supported anti-gay causes. They support the organization called the DeVos Family Supports Focus on the Family, which, among other things, promotes conversion therapy for gay people. So far from protecting, queer students in our schools, the person who's going to be in charge of the nation's school children is an anti-gay bigot, and so that is very frightening. And we don't know on which of these aspects of her background will come to the fore first. But I think we have to be prepared for all of it to be part of her agenda.
Yeah, can you say anything about how people are preparing to fight back against this agenda? I mean, you mentioned the referendums that were beat back around the vouchers, but have you seen any signs of people starting to organize against these kinds of policies?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there is an opening in the new federal education legislation that's taken some of the pressure off of high-stakes standardized testing and allowed more options for states to deploy tests or not as they see fit. And in some places, parents, teachers, and students have applied pressure and actually seen reductions in tests. And states have eliminated tests that they now deem unnecessary. So in some places, you have students taking, in your whole school career, you could take more than 100 tests. I mean, it's become ridiculous. But there have been some victories challenging high-stakes standardized testing. And I still think that parents have a right to opt their children out of standardized testing between schools. So for the standardization movement, they have to compare schools. Given the open racism of the people that Trump is bringing into office, I think what was true before is more true now, which is that we can never do enough to affirm our black students. We have a racist and unequal society, and it's no surprise to anybody that the schools often reflect that. And I think we have an opportunity as activists to bring together issues that are not yet connected in the public mind, but increasingly for people who live through the connections between the issues, they are connected and they're articulating it. 50 organizations came together last year and put together a statement called Vision for Black Lives, in which they basically said that the privatization movement is not bringing justice to black children. They decried and protested against, in that statement, privatization, union busting, deregulation, standardized testing, zero tolerance policies in schools. And so I think we have an opportunity to bring people together on this issue and talk about the ways that the movement for Black lives that is growing around the country is connected to the need for justice in the schools.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the Vision for Black Lives platform, because the follow-up question I had about DeVos has to do with a little bit about why is the protection of public education and opposition to charters so important to the platform, the Black Lives platform, and what are the impacts that this growth of charter schools has on youth and particularly low-income communities of color? Well,
it's sold as, I'll say more in a minute about how it's amazingly sold as racial justice, all the privatization is. But the reason it's important is because when we set up education as a competition and, as a game with winners and losers, we are inherently setting up a hierarchy, and we end up reproducing the inequalities that we say we're trying to stop. And we see this every place that competition becomes the dominant ethos of schooling. The pressure around test scores, around behavior issues in the classroom, everything, all of those pressures get ratcheted up, and it's black students who suffer the worst. They're the ones who often are in a situation where they need the most to affirmation and engagement with school, and then are given the most wooden, stripped down, boring curriculum because there's so much pressure on educators and their supervisors to raise standardized test scores. So we end up warping education in a way that is harmful, I would argue, for students who are the neediest. And we generally reproduce the inequalities. Every standardized test all over the world tells you the exact same thing, which is who are the in-groups and who are the out-groups, who are the elites and who are the subordinates. And whether that's Asia, Africa, or North America, standardized tests tell you the exact same thing. And so the emphasis on privatization, competition, and choice end up harming the people who need a public resource the most, the people whose families and don't have the resources to swoop in and lift them up in all kinds of other ways in life. So it's important for us, I think, to preserve the public sphere. It's also a democratic space where even as distorted or bureaucratic or inefficient or unequal or undemocratic as it may be, it still remains, at least on paper and in some way, shape, and form, a space in which parents, teachers, and students have rights, and have rights to participate in governance, in control. And so part of what that vision for Black Lives statement and demands call for is democracy, basically, that there should be democratic governance over schools. The problem with choice, the way Betsy DeVos frames it, is that it's really privatized choice only. There's certain kinds of choices that we will allow, and that is basically the choice for you to exercise as a kind of education consumer, choosing a school, leaving this school, going to that school. But if you choose to stay in your school and improve it, then there are not resources that are going to flood in to make sure that you can choose to have a democratic, richly resourced, well-rounded public school education. That choice is taken off of the table. And then, of course, there's the fact that another way inequality rears its head in choice schemes is that it's the schools themselves that end up doing the choosing. That is, you can choose to apply to whatever school you want, but that doesn't mean that that school has to choose you. And in fact, in the privatized, deregulated scheme, schools no longer have any obligation to any particular student. That is, you can be rejected everywhere and find yourself schoolless. Mm-hmm. So in places like New Orleans, Detroit, and so on, we see patterns of inequality and of schools doing choosing that fall along similar lines that reinforce racial and economic segregation in familiar patterns. So what's called justice is very much a reproduction of injustice. I just want to say one more thing on this point, which is that a lot of people are going to yell and scream at Betsy DeVos about privatization and inequality and racism, and that's good. I'm glad. I'm going to be one of those people yelling. But the real deal, and something I think we have to confront, is the fact that she is working basically out of the Democratic Party playbook. If she goes around saying that she's doing privatization in order to save the little black and brown children of the United States, then she is taking a page straight out of the playbook of Barack Obama and Arne Duncan. We cannot forget that it's these people who have wrapped privatization in the robes of the civil rights movement and pushed that line all along. So that is part of what we're confronting here, is now an extreme version of what has been a bipartisan consensus for several decades now.
Yeah, thanks for adding that. I think it's really important to realize that this Betsy DeVos is just picking up the baton from this current administration. We're coming to the end of our segment, but I did want to ask you before we finish up about higher education. A couple days ago, Elizabeth Warren mentioned that she's troubled by DeVos' non-existent record on higher education. So I was hoping you could talk about, or just at least comment on, the current trends of the neoliberalization of universities and how you expect a Trump presidency is going to be affecting higher education.
Mm-hmm. Well, we all know that now there's north of $1 trillion in student debt out there that people are carrying. And And it's just completely ridiculous the way that the cost of college has gone up and up and up. And at the same time, when we look at what's happening inside colleges themselves, we see a reorganization of labor that basically has colleges paying starvation wages for a great amount of the teaching that's going on. And a great deal of salary and money and resources going into administration. So there's something really rotten in the House of Higher Education that I think is making it both less accessible to people, putting them in a situation of being debt peons, basically, for life in many cases. And at the same time, it's just making the situation inside the universities intolerable and unsustainable for people who are trying to work there and teach there and do research and writing. So we have a big, big problem. And the solution, I think, is not to expect Democrats or Republicans to swoop in and save the day, but for us to build a movement on the ground, real grassroots power that can help push back. And we see graduate students and adjunct teachers organizing, college professors organizing. We see them forming labor unions. In many K-12 unions, we see reform caucuses vying for control of the unions in New York, in Massachusetts, in Chicago, in Los Angeles, in Seattle. And so there's something that is swelling up from below that I think can help change the labor equation inside our K-12 schools and inside higher education. And I think that is an essential part of solving what's broken in higher education.
Yeah. We've come to the end of our segment pretty much, but I just wanted to give you, if you want to make any final remarks, we would love to hear them.
Sure. I guess the last thing I want to say is that there has been a temptation for the past many years to think that maybe we could team up with the right wing. In some places here in New York State, Republican-leaning parents have also come to oppose standardized testing or also come to oppose the Common Core standards. And so from the right, there's been this critique that the Common Core is socialist indoctrination and all these tests are horrible, let's get rid of them. And from the left, there's a totally different critique, which is that you're ruining school and you're ruining well-rounded education. And so now we have a situation where the incoming Secretary of Education is also opposed to Common Core and says that she's for local control and giving parents choice. And I think we on the left have to beware the idea that we can team up with the right wing and get what we want. I think their agenda is dramatically different from ours, and we should understand that behind their opposition to public schools comes with that racism and all kinds of other ideas that we don't want to have anything to do with. And I think we can make a case to, 90% of kids are in the public schools. So that means a huge number of people are connected by millions of threads to the public schools, parents, community members, people who work in the schools. So the fight to save this one of the last great public democratic spaces in our society, and by the way, not just to keep it as it is, because we want it to be better too. So this is a fight to defend and improve public education. And I think we can potentially recruit millions of people to this fight if we articulate it as a fight to defend and improve our schools. We can take concrete actions like opting out of the tests. We can fight for fair, equitable funding for our schools. We can fight for desegregated schools. We can fight to end the criminalization of our students, especially our Black and brown students in our schools. There's lots of things that we can spend these years fighting around, and we can build broad coalitions. We should never forget the role of the Democratic Party leadership in pushing many of these same policies while we link arms with all kinds of people from all walks of life who want to fight for the same things. So I think we have both, in some ways, a frightening set of years ahead of us and tremendous opportunities to push for improved public education for everybody.
Oh my gosh, Brian, whenever I talk to you, I just want to raise my fist and take it to the streets. So I really thank you so much for joining us today. If anyone wants to learn more about some of the movements against standardized testing to fight back against the growth of charter schools and vouchers, can you recommend any kinds of movement type organizations that people should check out to learn more?
Absolutely. I tell you what, I will post on my website, brianpjones.tumblr.com. I'll post a list of organizations that people can look at nationwide, so it'll be there.
Great. Thank you so much. Great talking with you again.
See you soon.
Berkeley campus as we prepare for our Inauguration Day resistance. As you can see, there's a ton of beautiful work and comradeship happening all around our demands for free, public, accessible education. The University of California has 9 teaching campuses, and our union, our labor union, the UAW 2865, is comprised of student workers at all of those 9 teaching campuses. So not only at Berkeley, but across the state, north to south, east to west, students are going to be walking out, and student workers are going to be holding teach-ins, where their labor is going to be on their own terms and geared towards vision for public education. And our demands are, of course, all available at uaw2865.org. But I think it's really important to hold that this is an effort that is across the state. It's not just happening here in Berkeley.
We're here working with everyone. We're union members, we're students, undergrads, graduate students, community members, and we're all here in solidarity. It doesn't matter, like our religion, our race, our gender identity, it doesn't matter. We're here to support one another. We're here to support one another's respective struggles, our communities, and I think that's very important. As students, we have this great privilege to speak out, especially in the United States, where in other countries students are oppressed and silenced. So we feel like it's our duty as students, or even as human beings, to speak out, to stand in solidarity with everyone, and to go against Trump's government, which is silencing us and repressing us.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the rise in fascism that we've seen in California in the wake of Trump's election, and how that's been manifesting on college campuses especially. In the last many months, we've seen posters and flyers of explicitly white nationalist and fascist aligned. And now Milo Yiannopoulos, a kind of very prominent alt-right figure, a transphobe, misogynist, and someone who's deeply aligned with the white supremacist, white nationalist movement, has organized a speaking tour on many college campuses across the United States, including originally 5 UC campuses. Several of us went to UC Davis in an effort to support students who were speaking out, especially queer and students of color, about what was happening there. And we were confronted by a huge group of white supremacists and very high-profile white supremacists who were organizing out in the open, and it was very, very scary. One thing that's extremely important to share is that many of the students and faculty who've been most vocal about raising concerns about what his speaking tour means have received death threats and threats of other forms of violence against their bodies and against their communities. And one of the major concerns we're thinking about, Milo mobilizes this idea of free speech, that this is his right, his constitutional right to free speech, and it's actually violent speech, it's hatred, it's incitements to physical attack, and those are manifesting now, both on the ground and then also through threats of much more substantial violence. Some of us have had threats of loaded weapons being used against us. So we're urging students to show up and support a rally on February 1st outside of the Martin Luther King Student Union Center, where Milo will be speaking inside. We're hoping to have a lot of folks there to create an alternative space where we're really thinking about what it means to build collective solidarities and mutual aid right now in this moment where there are escalated attacks?
I am here organizing with all my fellow students because we believe that it's important to have a stance, a representation against everything that the new president represents or represented in his new campaign, which is racism, homophobia, Islamophobia, xenophobia, all sorts of discrimination, right? And I feel like it's as a public university, it's important for us to take a stance, a moral stance against.
Hello, my name is Kevin Zeiss, and I'm the co-director of PopularResistance.org. I served as a senior advisor in the Stein campaign, and we're going to have a conversation now with Callie Okuno. Callie is a longtime activist and organizer. He's a co-founder of Cooperate Jackson, which we'll hear a little bit about, and also active with the Malcolm X grassroots movement. Jackson, Mississippi has become a hotbed for real building of political power and putting in place new economic approaches. We're going to do in this 15 minutes is two things. Talk about economic democracy at the local level, what that means and what that involves. And then we're going to spend most of our time talking about how we build political power at the grassroots level. Callie, welcome to the show. We really appreciate you taking the time. I know you're in the midst of tornadoes down there, so hopefully our connections will stay good. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Now, we interviewed you, Callie, on our radio show, clearingthefogradio.org, a couple weeks ago. So if people want a longer discussion, we had an hour-long discussion with Callie on that show. Margaret Flowers and I did. So you can go to clearingthefogradio.org to see that longer interview. Let's start, Callie, with the question of economic democracy. Can you tell us in a few minutes what economic democracy is and what kind of programs that involves at the local level?
At the local level, in the Jackson context, it really means serving as an economic catalyst and an economic developer, first and foremost. Just want everybody to understand it, but it's rooted in a set of cooperative principles. And those principles work on facilitating collective ownership by workers and or by consumers. And it's a place where workers can determine, their working conditions, their working hours, the different terms of the work, kind of who they get to work with. So, it's based upon direct democracy at the workplace and worker ownership to ensure direct democracy at the workplace. And with that, the aim and objective is workers in control of capital, as opposed to capital being in control of workers and dictating to workers, all those different terms, the terms of conditions, the terms of, their wages. So it inverses that paradigm. And another critical thing on the local level, it also helps to ensure that there are local jobs, because workers who are vested in the community, rooted in the community, they're not going to make certain decisions to just kind of uproot their company or uproot their business and try to relocate to, Southeast Asia or Mexico. So it helps to ground communities in the service of their direct needs and in their direct wants. And it also helps from, in our case, what we've been stressing, in our case, it helps to ground the community in principles of sustainable justice, right? Because we can eliminate a lot of the waste that comes with packaging of products from throughout the world, and we eliminate the carbon use, etc. So on the local level, this is really the broad kind of practice that we are developing and advancing in cooperation, Jackson, to serve our needs.
Beautiful. And, I know that there are other programs beyond worker and consumer cooperatives that are part of economic democracy that you've talked about in Jackson, things like participatory budgeting, where the people actually have a direct role in deciding how city funds are spent in their communities. And so if people want to learn about participatory budgeting, there's lots of good sources on that on the web, and it's really a way to really empower people. Another part of it is land trusts, where you create a nonprofit where the community has power to determine how land is developed and how prices for housing are controlled. And that gives a lot of power. And another final one is public banking, where you create a bank for Jackson or for Baltimore, where I live, Baltimore. In fact, our mayoral candidate in Baltimore, Joshua Harris, running as a Green, put forth a great economic democracy program. And one thing I really liked about seeing what Jackson was doing, it was the same thing that we were trying to do in Baltimore. I think this economic democracy approach is a powerful way for people to really get control of their economic lives through worker ownership, for example, their community's economic lives through participatory budgeting and land trusts, and their whole city by setting the goals, people voting and determining how to set the goals for a public bank. So it just shifts the power in an incredible way from City Hall, from the developers to the people. And that's just an amazing, that would be an amazing transformation that would, I think, move us greatly and provide models all across the country. I think every city could use this. That's what I really want to ask you about, Callie.
Yes.
How did you get to the point where you now are putting cooperatives in place, where you had built the community power, the political power, in order to actually put these programs into place? How did you get there?
Two things I would really stress in the time that we have.
Yes.
One is community organizing, and what I mean by that is connecting with people on a one-on-one basis and on a one-on-one level. And that takes time. It takes years. And the work here in Jackson, just so everybody knows that we are a part of, that is work that started very concretely in the early 1970s.
Yes.
And it took years, decades for us to build a base and to build some strong and solid understanding of what the overall objectives and aims were of the social movement. That took time. So
what
organizing, base building, organizing
did that?
took time.
What organization did that?
It started here. I would really say, so folks understand, it's really started here. The tradition that we come out of really started with SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and was then later transferred into the Student National Coordinating Committee when it made a kind of a strategic, significant shift. And then that fed into an organization called the Provisional Governor Republic of New Africa. And that laid the foundation for the New African People's Organization, which then gave birth to the Malcolm X grassroots movement. So you kind of had these strong generational foundations almost every decade that really laid this foundation here. And Chokwe Lumumba, who you mentioned in reference, came in with the Republican New Africa and was one of the founders of the New African People's Organization and the Malcolm X grassroots movement, and really was one of many people. People should understand it wasn't just him. One of many people who kind of led that work and laid the foundation.
Let me ask you something before you go on, though, with the other piece, because we still have about 8 minutes to talk about this. Let me ask you about that grassroots organizing. I mean, describe what that really is. Is that like a door-to-door? Is that like public meetings? Is that how do you? I mean, every city has groups doing all sorts of grassroots organizing, and are there ways to bring those groups together and use the work they've done for years to put together this kind of economic democracy power structure?
I would challenge that a little bit, Kevin. Actually, I don't know if we have a lot of door-to-door organizing in a lot of communities.
Right.
And I think what substitutes is organizing in a lot of communities is more kind of mobilizing it and a certain level of advocacy work, right? And I think the major difference, I would say, it really, whatever you do, it starts with building relationships in your community, right? And that means you have to be rooted, invested in that community. You're taking a part in the active life of the community. And that means being engaged in everything from, things most people find insignificant. We do a lot of birthday activities with children in the neighborhood, because it's a way for us to get involved and know people in the community and get to know their personality, get to know their needs, and what their interests are, right? doing basketball tournaments, right? Doing scout-like activities. These are all things that accompany the relationship building, which starts with the door knocking, but are more or less really focused on at each level and each activity. How do we get to really build with this family, build with this individual, and build in the community to build strong ties and strong bonds? So it's not just a one-dimensional come out for this rally or come out, to vote, but there's a deeper engagement of, what are our common interests, what are our common needs, and what is, therefore, the point I was going to touch on. I think the other critical piece is having a radical imagination.
Yes, I like that.
And that is the critical piece that I think that, for us was a strategic shift, even in our own work about 15 years ago. Because we were doing all those things, but I think we had to really shift what we thought was possible and how we would get there. And that's where the radical imagination really comes in and I think makes the qualitative difference.
And how long ago was that shift?
For us, I would really trace it to September 11th.
Really?
Yeah, I would really trace it to September 11th. Our organization for years, just has been doing some aspects of that type of organizing. And we had real solid, talking about in Jackson, we had real solid relationships in the community.
Right.
We had a youth basketball team, a youth art club. We had all those different things. But, we had talked about the necessity of building, distributed power and autonomous power on the community level. But there was something missing in between having these kind of organic ties and how do we actually utilize it and wield it to better serve our needs. And then after September 11th, we recognized that particularly some of our work around, the defense of political prisoners and prisoners of war, trying to get those folks out. Many of them had been, in prison going back to the late 1960s and early 1970s from the Republic of North Africa and the Black Panther Party.
Interesting.
We've been doing that work for years. And September 11th, we realized most of them were probably never going to get free. And we had to realize that in terms of our work, we had to kind of change it in a lot of fundamental ways that we're not going to have time, I think, to really talk about, unfortunately. But it caused us to shift and to say, okay, in a place like Jackson, which is 85% Black,
right,
overwhelmingly poor, where the real unemployment rate hovers at around, about 50%. Most people will kind of look at that kind of last two pieces, the high concentration of poverty, the high rate of unemployment as weaknesses. We look at it, and this was part of radical imagination. That's time that people potentially have available to do a deeper level of organizing.
Nice.
So we had to flip it.
Right.
Right? We had to flip it. So what is the asset that exists here? I hate to use that language, but what is
good
the
language.
asset?
I think that's very important language. You use the word asset. People, even in impoverished communities, there are assets that people don't see, and you really have to stop and think, what are our assets? And when you're talking about the high levels of poverty and unemployment, major assets, the people, and the people have time. Right. And so I think that's very important to flip that, to understand that.
Yeah. So that was the one of the critical switches for us.
Right.
People have time. How can we tap into that time? How can we tap into that energy?
Now, how do you take your radical imagination and get the people to see it?
One of the things that we tapped into, I think we made some first mistakes by really, declaring a lot of things, as opposed to, we made a shift, I would say, around 2004, 2005, after we kind of really looked at that. We really made a shift on, let's start with some concrete projects.
Right.
And let's start with some skill building on the basis of the relationships that people have.
Right.
So one of the things that we knew is like, in the Deep South, there's a ton of people with very practical skills, plumbing, fixing cars, electrical stuff, and that exists in abundance in the Black community in Jackson, and those communities that I'm talking about. Right. And the critical thing was to figure out how could we start some practical projects that took people, utilizing those skills on a voluntary basis
Nice.
and do things over a protracted period of time that brought people together but got them to see, at the end of the day, we have accomplished this. We have fixed this community center. We have helped somebody redevelop rebuild their house. So
Nice.
those are the concrete things that help to get people to understand that, hey, we can do more.
Right.
We can do a lot more. And it doesn't take a profound amount of resources. If we utilize our time and energy effectively, we can harness and gather and collectivize the little resources we have to then move on some larger and more systemic projects.
What you're really describing is people realizing they have power, that they have power in their community to improve their community, even without the government, even with the government working against them. And I know we don't have time to go into it. We have about 1 minute left, so you have get your final thought in after this. But we really have to recognize that we also work in the political sphere, the electoral sphere, and you all did that, and you can look at your websites to see more about that. But people need to realize they have power, and that's a really critical lesson. And so, any thoughts on that in 30 seconds?
Yeah, well, I just want to touch on this last piece to really put it in context of what we're dealing with now. We are the federal government that we now have as of yesterday is a government which is going to work against the interests of virtually almost everybody.
That's right.
So we need to get prepared. We need to get connected. We need to get united. We need to fully unleash our collective radical imagination.
Exactly.
To deal with this and reverse this trend. And we don't want to reverse it to kind of return to the status quo, because it's not like the status quo was that great to begin with.
Right.
So we need to use our radical transformation to defeat this neo-fascist orientation that's being rammed down our throats, starting yesterday with all these executive orders and reversal of executive orders.
Right.
We need to use our radical imagination to build the future that we want.
Beautiful.
To build a really democratic future rooted in economic democracy on a broad systemic way that's about equity and equality and justice for those who've been denied it for so long.
Yes, I think this is an opportunity for a real awakening. The Trump inauguration yesterday, just like 9/11 was for you all, all those years ago. Now I think for people across the country, it's a radical opportunity to awaken, to break out of this ping-pong game between the Democrats and Republicans, stop going back and forth, and to create the vision we want. And so I hope that people will check out the longer interview of Kali on clearingthefogradio.org, where we talked for him an hour, and check out the Cooperate Jackson website. Another website, itsoureconomy.us, covers these issues as well. If you go to Joshua Harris's website for Mayor of Baltimore, you can see a whole economic democracy plan for urban areas, and check that as well. So there's a lot of resources, folks. This is a time of challenge, but it's also a time of opportunity. I think what's going on in Jackson, Mississippi is a great example of what we can do if we unify and work together toward a common vision. Thanks a lot, Callie. Hope we can talk to you more down the road.
Looking forward to it.
Hello, Occupy Inauguration. I'm Howie Hawkins, a Green Party member in Syracuse, New York. And I've been active in the Green Party since our first national organizing meeting in St. Paul, Minnesota in August 1984. In 2014, I was the Green Party candidate for governor of New York. And we got 5% of the vote, which is the most for an independent third party on the left in a century. And got some of our demands. We got them moving forward. We got a ban on fracking in New York State. We got a $15 minimum wage. We got in progress tuition-free higher education at public universities. And I can't be with you because I got to punch a time clock. I get off at 3 in the morning. I won't be down there in D.C. with y'all. But I think Jill Stein asked me to say a few words about what we should be doing with this new president in there. And I think what we need to do is pretty much the same as what we did, whether it was Clinton or Trump that got elected. And that is to go back to our communities, build our base. And when we have a sizable cohort of Greens in city offices, county legislatures, state legislatures, and the U.S. House, then when we make national demands and when we run a candidate for president, we're going to be a force to be reckoned with. So the first step in organizing is to build relationships so that local people know you and trust you. So I'm here in our USDA certified food desert on the south side of Syracuse in front of the Eat to Live food co-op that we built to provide fresh produce and groceries in our inner city neighborhood. And I'm just going to show you, hopefully this comes out at night. I don't see much sunlight. I work a night shift, third shift. So you can see there our food store. And right next door, we have the Southside Communication Center, which is sponsored by the Southside Community Coalition. It's a program for school children. There are computers in there they can use, do their homework, learn how to use computers, and it gives them something to do after work. And there's still kids in there. It's about 6:30 in the evening. So the other thing I'm involved in, hopefully I'll get back in the light so you can see me, is in my labor movement, in my union, Teamsters Local 317. And also I'm part of the Labor Notes Network. Got my sweatshirt on. This is my favorite logo. The International Troublemakers and Boat Rockers Union, the Global Local. So we've been fighting to save our pension, which is going bankrupt. If you read the New York Times and Forbes magazine recently, we got bamboozled, or our trustees did, by some Wall Street sharpies who overinvested the fund in hedge funds and private equity to try to catch up and charge enormous fees and commissions, and it's in trouble. And so I'm also in the middle of a protest to the Department of Labor. I got disqualified for a local union election because they said I didn't pay my dues, but I'm on dues checkoff. It was a setup. And that's a long story, but we got a local group, Teamsters Local 317 for Democracy, and we're fighting on these issues. So I'm gonna go down the block now and show you the Green Party storefront on the south side of Syracuse and talk about local elections. So here we are in front of the Green Party storefront on the south side of Syracuse. I hope you can see the sign up there. And then we got our posters. We still got the posters up from this last election, 2016. Jill Stein and Jamal Baraka. And then Robin Laverne Wilson, our U.S. Senate candidate. Then we got shadows here. I got my car light showing this. Tax the 1%. We support single payer. One nation, one plan, single payer. 100% renewable energy by 2030. So in Syracuse, I'm trying to decide whether to run for mayor or for district council. I got 48% in this district 6 years ago. Last year, citywide, I got 35% running for city auditor. We have 4 candidates in 2015. We all got citywide 25 to 35%. So we're very close to electing somebody here. And so we got a lot of issues. I don't have time to go into them, but I think the thing I want to close with is saying that you can count on us here to be fighting in community and labor movements, and then running our own candidates so those movements are not being taken for granted, and start electing people. And I know that we can count on you to go back to your communities and do the same.
Hello again, coming to you from the Green News Network on this day of inaugurating the resistance. And now I'm very honored to be joined by Margaret Flowers, who is a powerhouse of resistance, shall we say, in so many ways. And as you may know, that Margaret was a recent Senate candidate for the Green Party for the state of Maryland, has been a pediatrician, is also a practitioner of political medicine, I would say, working to fix that mother of all illnesses, our political system, and also one of the mainstays of popular resistance. So many of these streams are converging today in the first day of the new regime of the empire, I guess you could say. And so healthcare is very much on everyone's mind. In fact, President Trump's first official act in office, I think, was to sign this executive order that gives leeway to the agencies to delay, to waive, and to change provisions of the Affordable Care Act. And we don't exactly know what he's going to do.
Right.
But you know, it certainly adds uncertainty. It adds uncertainty to a very uncertain, insecure situation where people are really struggling for health, struggling for health security, hoping that they don't get sick. You know, a sort
Which
of
is the American
faith-based
way, right?
American healthcare
Right.
system is just pray that you don't get sick.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah, well, and I really came into activism in a big way through the healthcare lens, like you, coming out of practice and seeing that there were bigger issues out there that we needed to deal with that affected people that were coming into our offices. And so I was in Congress in 2009, 2010 as a congressional fellow for Physicians for National Health Program when we were fighting to get single payer, national improved Medicare for all, and the Democrats had it off the table. So it was very to see how that worked, that even though 80% of Democratic voters in the polls wanted a national single-payer healthcare system, it was off the table for the Democrats. And so now we're in a Trump administration. He's actually, by this executive order, signaling Congress that he's going to move faster, that they're taking too long to repeal and replace. And so he's going to start that process right now, giving them the leeway to cut taxes, to lower the requirements of what insurance companies have to cover in their benefits. He may take away the individual mandate. That will be an interesting one because the insurance companies want that one, so that will be a big battle with them.
he can allow states, as I understand, to raise co-pays and premiums,
Right.
and reduce coverage.
Right. And we'll see what happens with Medicaid on that. But so we're in an interesting time, and I think that my take on this is that no matter who is in office, if we want to solve the healthcare crisis, it's going to be up to us to organize and fight for it. We've always known this fight had to happen, but now we're even more in a situation where we have to come together and be very clear about what it is that we're fighting for, because this is an opportunity as the Affordable Care Act unravels, and it was failing anyway, but as it unravels more quickly, that we make the only politically feasible solution a national improved Medicare for all. And there are a lot of hurdles in that, particularly just as we saw in 2008, 2010, a lot of the progressive and Democratic groups were lining up around the Affordable Care Act. They're doing that again. They're lining up to defend the Affordable Care Act. And that seems really tempting, right? Because we don't want people to lose what they have. But at the same time, if we're not clear, you know, Bernie Sanders says, we'll save the ACA now and we'll fight for Medicare for all later. No, we have to fight for Medicare for all right now from the get-go. And so making the 2018 election, the 2020 election, a mandate, you know, that the only solution that is acceptable to the voters is national improved Medicare for all.
Yes, and you know, if you accepted the position that what we have to do is to defend the Affordable Care Act, then suddenly you're in the position of having to defend the individual mandate, which is, you know, one of the really problematic, extremely problematic, because it burdens, it creates an excessive burden on people who, you know, may not be able to afford the health care and may not need the health care. You know, it forces sort of the healthy working class people who don't quite qualify for the support.
For the subsidies, right.
Yes, so it really screws working class Americans, and to have to defend the ACA puts us in the position of defending some of the most egregious and unjust parts of the Affordable Care Act. So you're absolutely right. And I know, Margaret, that you've been working on sort of building a new organization to help join together so that people don't get diverted into simply focusing on what you can do at the state level.
Right.
So maybe you can talk about that, because this is, I think, a point of departure between sort of the more centrist liberal position, which goes beyond the ACA, but not in a definitive way and probably not in a sustainable way. So talk about why it is that we have to come together and continue to fight and really revive the fight for healthcare as a human right and through a national improved Medicare for all system.
Right, so there's two kind of interesting obstacles out there. The idea is being floated, and it actually came out of Democratic congressional staffers who wrote this guide called Indivisible, that the Democratic Party at the national level should not be pushed to do anything positive, that everybody should rally around the Democrats just to just fight the cuts that are being made, but never put any positive alternatives out there. So for the next 4 years, they're not willing to stand up and fight for stronger public education, for health care, for all the things that we need. So we have to say that, okay, Democrats, that's your agenda, that's not our agenda.
Was this a leaked document?
No, it's interesting. It's gone very widely through the Democratic and progressive community, and it's like, this is how the progressive Democrats can take over the Democratic Party like the Tea Party did the Republicans, which we know is a ridiculous notion. But the main theme of it is don't push them to do anything positive, just, you know.
Which is exactly the reason why, you know, why people did not come out, you know, to vote.
Right, exactly.
On behalf of the Democrats, because they've really thrown everyday people under the bus.
Right, and then the other line of thinking that's being pushed out there is because nothing can happen at the national level, we should be fighting at the state level for health reforms. And again, this is problematic because we can't really do a single payer system at the state level. We need federal financing for that. We need federal legislation to give us permission to create a single payer system. And some states are going to fight for it, and some states are not going to fight for it. We want everybody in the United States to have access to health care. And we know that when we do a national health system, we can provide high-quality, comprehensive health care to every person without copays or deductibles or premiums, just paid in through a progressive tax. So one of the things that was really clear to me in that fight in 2009, 2010, is we have to be independent of the corporate political parties' agendas. We have to be clear that the solution, the proven solution, is national improved Medicare for all, and we have to be uncompromising in our demand for that system. And we have the power to do that. Just like we've done these other battles, we stopped the Trans-Pacific Partnership because we made it politically toxic. We can get national improved Medicare for all by making it the only politically feasible solution.
Exactly. And to underscore that point, we stopped the KXL pipeline.
Right.
We stopped the first bombing campaign of Syria in 2013 because we really mobilized. We get stronger when we raise the bar and actually speak to what it is that people are hungering for, not by, you know, proposing little marginal window dressing on a house that's on fire.
Right.
So yeah, absolutely, we have every reason to be confident.
Yeah, and the new project that we're launching is based on the similar fight that we waged for 5.5 years to stop the Trans-Pacific Partnership. It's called HOPE, Health Over Profit for Everyone, because that's what we're really talking about. The bottom line of our system right now is profit for the industries. When the bottom line is health, we save money and everybody's healthier. So we'll be launching that at the end of January. We'll be providing tools for activists to get involved in their communities, to educate, to organize, to mobilize. That's the foundation of expressing our popular power. So if people are interested, watch for the HOPE website. It's healthoverprofit.org, and join in that. And we'll be doing national organizing calls as well to help people with that. But really, we have if we start building that framework now, we do have the power in 2018 and 2020 to make this a major electoral issue.
Right, and we have popular support. We know that in poll after poll, people are very supportive of a national healthcare system that treats healthcare as a right, not as something to profiteer over. And related to that, it's very important for people to push back against the against really the fear campaigning that this is going to bankrupt us or it's going to cost us more money. In fact, it doesn't cost any more money whatsoever. It's essentially the same cost, but what is it? It's like $400 billion in profits right now for the pharmaceutical and insurance industry. And instead, that money gets put into actually providing health care, and the costs then become distributed in a progressive way so that you pay as you're able, but everyone is covered. It doesn't depend on your job. It doesn't depend on your having a big fat pocketbook. We get health care as a human right for everyone at the same cost, and instead of right now you pay, it's death by 1,000 cuts. You pay in your municipal taxes, in your state and your federal taxes, you pay in your payroll taxes, you pay in your premiums and your co-pays. You pay in every imaginable direction. People are bleeding out, but instead we have one consolidated health care tax, which is progressive and built into the income tax.
And this is proven to work all around the world. We're spending twice as much per capita, and more than twice as much per capita than other industrialized nations who cover everybody with comprehensive benefits, and they have better health outcomes. So we are paying for it, but in addition to the profits, it's the huge amount of administrative costs. This removes that. It allows patients and health professionals to focus on what's in front of them, that getting people better, making them healthy, as opposed to, can you get this, can you get that? So it's if you want to learn more about it, check out healthoverprofit.org, and also Physicians for National Health Program, pnhp.org, has excellent resources there for people that want to learn more.
Wonderful.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Margaret, and thank you for tuning in, and stay tuned, stay active, and the fight has just begun.
That's right.
Hi, I'm Mel Figueroa. I'm the press director for the Stein campaign and executive producer of the Green News Network. I'm sitting here with Margaret Kimberly, George Martin, and David Cobb, and we're here in this hour to talk about resisting white supremacy and racial justice. Just going to give you a quick go-around to introduce yourselves, and then we'll launch into the discussion. Margaret?
I'm Margaret Kimberly from Black Agenda Report.
I'm George Martin, a fellow with the Liberty Tree Foundation and the Green Party.
I'm David Cobb. I was the Green Party nominee for president in 2004 and on the board of directors of Move to Amend, a campaign to abolish the idea that corporations have constitutional rights.
Great. So let's start off this discussion with, sort of how we got to this point. A lot of people are very nervous and very scared about what is going to come down in Trump's America. But, again, we have to look at the past and see what got us to this point. So a lot of people are very nostalgic for an Obama's America, for the 8 years that were epitomized by a black president in the White House. But what did that really represent? I mean, under Obama, we had 3 million people deported through the deporter-in-chief. We had a slew of the killings of black youth and women and children, much at the levels that have not been seen since lynching, etc. So I just wanted to get a quick go around as to what are your impressions of the 8 years of the Obama legacy, and how has that set us up for where we are now?
Well, I'd say that Obama's legacy is pretty hollow. I think the hope and the change was all marketing. As you point out, he was the deporter of more people than any other American president. There was no diminution in the mass incarceration of more than 2 million people. We learned that the police kill 3 people every single day. The Obama administration didn't prosecute one of those cops, not even one. He was the one who brought back the Espionage Act to use it to prosecute whistleblowers. This idea that there was this grand moment when he was president is false. And it's mostly because of his marketing skill and the hope, the false hope, that Democrats really are better than Republicans.
George, your thoughts?
I think it's living on the legend of the Democratic Party. He came in with so much hope and so many promises. And if anyone studies politics, when there's a change of administrations, the Democrats come in and say, kumbaya, let's all get together. The Republicans come in and kick butt. That's the reality. And when he came in, he had both the House and the Senate. And he didn't follow through on his promises. And he never used the word poor as we look at a 99% America. And so in terms of who the constituency is and where it's gone, we've heard about the failures. I'm a leader in the peace movement. Huge to give him the Nobel Peace Prize for no reason when he walked in and gave the nuclear weapons industry billions of dollars without anybody asking. And that's been his legacy, to sit in the White House and decide who's going to get killed that day by drones. It's not humanistic. And so we come to what you've talked about before and where we are, and in the last minute kind of scratching to get some things done. We move ahead with a vacant 8 years as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and absolutely, and you know, I just wanted to interject here with, you know, the to make the distinction between the sort of politics of representation, you know, that having a black president in the White House is basically a representation of, you know, a particular constituency, but in a system that stays the same, one that has been built on the oppression of people of color. David, you grew up in Texas, and
I did.
So let's get your perspective.
You know, Mel, it's interesting for me because, you know, I came of age and got involved in electoral politics out of work around the anti-apartheid movement. Mm-hmm. And I want to be clear, I wasn't a leader of the anti-apartheid movement. I was just beginning political consciousness, right? And I knew, though, that apartheid was wrong, and I didn't want to be part of that. And that process, frankly, led me to Jesse Jackson in 1984 as a student organizer. I worked on Jesse Jackson's campaign in 84 and 88. And so I feel in an unusual situation because I ended that moment thinking this country will never, in my lifetime, elect a black person president, because we had the better messaging, the better organizing, the better analysis, the better policy proposals, and it was clear to me we lost because Jesse was black, right? And so I will answer your question to this and say, honestly, Barack Obama deserves to be celebrated. The concept that a black person was president is something to acknowledge. That's for real. But I also had to tell many of my African-American friends, not these two, but others that were moved to tears and so hopeful and so exciting, and I say this with humility but sincerity. I can understand why for many people, seeing somebody that looks like them in the White House was an emotional, moving experience. But I'm gonna be straight up as a, not just working class, but as somebody who grew up in poverty in rural Texas. See, I had people look like me in the White House my entire life and did nothing but exploit, oppress, and just be part of a capitalist, racist system. So honestly, I wasn't disappointed by the Obama administration because he basically did what I thought he would do, which was to basically carry out the policies of the ruling class. So it's complicated, right? The policies were horrible. The optics of finally having a black person in the White House, all right, that's good, but what policies did we get out of it?
Right. Trump is, you know, has been sworn in as president of the United States, and a lot of people have a ton of anxiety of, you know, and have the sense that there is something qualitatively different now in the age of Trump. That, you know, a lot of people are now very concerned about the rise of hate groups. There's something like 900 hate incidents that happened after the election, and a lot of people are very concerned about what is going to happen as far as the overt attacks that are going to come down against communities of color. So, you know, what is qualitatively different about the Trump era, and what implications does that have for people like
citizens of the United States, and yet in Congress only a few voted against war. Who do they represent? 90% of the people in Congress come in as millionaires, and they represent themselves and they represent the money. 40% of their time is used for fundraising to continue that effort and to continue to payroll where they're going, and the American people have been left in the dust. So as we talk about Trump, To me, it's a continuation, but it is also a need to build up all the further in our movements. And I think that's what this weekend is about. Our tools as activists are education, public witness, and lobbying. From the point of public witness, we are here right now to educate. We are here in Washington in so many ways, so that we can begin to move that public, to move the politicians, no matter where we stand. And at the same time, as we go forward, and I'll say this as a Green, if they don't represent us, we need to move them out and get in people who have our values.
Absolutely. And, you know, again, in addition to, again, moving the politicians, there is also the question on the table in the dialogue right now about the immediate protection of communities, you know, from attacks and whatnot. And Kimberly, can you also speak to that? What does safety pins mean?
Well, safety, it's meaningless. It's rather sad to me that opposition and resistance boils down to safety pins and pink hats. You know, if Hillary Clinton had won, I would not feel safer as a person of color, as an activist. I would not feel safer at all. You can say, and I believe it's true, that the Republicans now control the federal judiciary, Supreme Court, and the other federal courts. That does worry me. But what did we get with Obama? What do we get when Democrats are in office? Very often it's the Democrats who will make a Republican dream come true. Republicans dreamed of getting rid of the right to public assistance, but Bill Clinton is the one who carried it out. Ronald Reagan tried to kill Gaddafi, but Obama is the one who actually did it. So I think people need to be very mindful of what it is that Democrats really do once they get in. We had a President Obama who acted against giving people the right to request resentencing. Those people who were sentenced during the worst days of the crack cocaine conspiracy to put black people in jail, those horrific draconian sentences. The Obama Justice Department went to court and said those people should not have the right to be resentenced. So I don't know what it is that Trump can do. I suppose things can always be worse. I suppose that's always a possibility. But when we look at what Democrats really do when they get in, I think that should give us pause before we assume the apocalypse has arrived because there's a Republican in control.
You know, Margaret, I really appreciate both George, all three of you, because it reminds me of this, that Barack Obama campaigned on messaging of hope and change, right? It was marketing, branding is how Margaret talked about it. But it does inspire me to recognize that our message as leftists or progressives, see, our messaging works. That's really important. Mm-hmm. Like it's actually a very effective thing. Now, his policies were horrific. You know, George, it occurs to me that in a very real way, we could say Barack Obama was the black Bill Clinton, or we could say Bill Clinton is the white Barack Obama, because they both used a kind of messaging and rhetoric that tried to appeal to a certain sentiment, but had horrific policies. I'll be honest. I was a Democrat. I worked for Jesse Jackson in '84 and '88. I worked for Jerry Brown in '92. Straight up, Bill Clinton turned me into a Green. Right? And I could list NAFTA, Don't Ask, Don't Tell, the Telecommunications Act of 1996, the Anti-Terrorism Act, which actually was the precursor to what became the Patriot Act, right? I mean, the horrific policies of Bill Clinton and neoliberalism, which, by the way, just means to privatize public sector, right? Like, that's all it really means, right? But that neoliberal agenda was something that Bill Clinton began. And I want to remind viewers that Inaugurate the Resistance. See, we were organizing, some of us, to resist when we all assumed it would be Hillary Clinton that we were protesting, right? So you really want to nail something. And I thought that Hillary Clinton was going to be president, and I predicted Bill Clinton turned me into a Green, Hillary Clinton will make a lot more.
Yep.
Here's the thing that's different, though. Because Donald Trump is so explicitly supremacist, so explicitly racist, so explicitly a neo-fascist, it is giving permission to the most horrific, most vile, and most disgusting parts of the hidden corners of the American psyche. So I do think that there is a difference between one to the other. I do think that we have to be able to come together and actually resist, but I'm with Margaret on this one. Like, at the end of the day, we have to build a people's movement, whether it's neoliberal against neoliberalism or neo-fascism. I'm against both.
Yeah, people said today, he's not my president. But when do we ever get a president?
Yes.
If you're against war, if you're against neoliberalism, if you're against mass incarceration, you never get a president. So I think that would have been the case no matter who was inaugurated today.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think so. And now I think, in these last few minutes of this roundtable, I'd like to get into that, because there is a way forward. There is a progressive agenda that I believe the majority of American people really want. But pushing for that in this era where there's license given to the most explicit, most horrific, elements of society that is sort of building themselves up for something for us to oppose. Now, that puts us in a little bit of a conundrum, because again, and I know that David, you and Margaret were talking about this, and so maybe you can get into it here on camera, about how the Democrats are trying to kind of trump, shall we say, the mantle of opposition. John Lewis in particular, standing up to Donald Trump, and of course this mantra right now that's coming out of the sort of Democratic side of love trumps hate. Well, let's get into what actually does Trump hate. Let's get into again how a real dialogue about real solutions can emerge when both the Republicans are coming down so hard and the Democrats are kind of, again, adjusting their branding, right, to position themselves as the opposition. So, David, you want to just sort of start off with what you and Margaret were talking about?
Well, listen, I was complimenting Margaret Kimberly, who wrote a phenomenal piece for Black Agenda Report on John Lewis. And I really appreciated, Margaret, that you acknowledged the role that he did play, right? And how, I can't even imagine the depth of courage for crossing the Edmund Pettus Bridge, right? So I step into this conversation with immense respect for that history. But then I ask myself, well, actually, I should just turn it over to you, because you were willing to talk about lifting that memory up, but then saying, what has John Lewis done? Because I came of age at a time when the Congressional Black Caucus was literally called the conscience of Congress. Yes. Where is the conscience of Congress today?
Well, there isn't much of one. The Black misleadership class, as we refer to them at Black Agenda Report, are epitomized by John Lewis, people who made their bones, so to speak, back in those days of the liberation movement of the 60s and early 70s, and who then parlayed that experience into elective office or other positions. And I'm not saying people can't do that, but it should mean something. I can't sit here 50 years later and let him off the hook for saying that Trump was illegitimate because he believed Russia interfered with our elections. That is a straight up, I believe it is false. I believe there's no evidence for it. It comes straight from the White House, straight from the corporate media. And if it was going to say Trump was illegitimate, I don't know why that is what one would choose. But the Congressional Black Caucus, they now suffer from the pressures of outside forces who targeted them for defeat, who uplifted some and sent some packing.
Look at what happened to Cynthia McKinney.
Exactly. So now they are like the rest of Congress, and they serve the interests. They don't bite the hand that feeds them. They don't serve the interests of the masses of people. And they, like the rest of the Democratic Party, need to be called to account for not doing what it is we want them to do.
Absolutely.
And, so it just in these last couple of minutes, let's. I'd like our viewers to also, not feel sort of discouraged by all of these things coming down. And so, I'd like to get some thoughts, and I'd like to start with you, George, as to what is the message that needs to come through loud and clear in order for real change and real justice to trump the hate that's coming down.
I'll tell you, as an original Black Panther, it's to fill the gap, and the gap is growing. As we look forward, We need to get our satisfaction out of local democracy because Washington has been stuck on stupid for a long time and getting dumber and dumber. We need to not only think globally, but work locally. And also we need to, on a national basis, build the party, the Green Party, that is going to be the challenge. Not only the challenge, but the party of the future. And if we do both of those at the same time, we can grow, and at the same time, we will have the energy because we're doing something and getting some things done. In terms of foreign policy, we have to go with our allies. We have to support the United Nations. In terms of where the U.S. foreign policy is going, it changes every day. The appointees switch this way and that way, but we know what's right and what's wrong. And so for those of us who work internationally, that's the direction that we're going in.
And I find it surprising that after Hillary Clinton's ignominious defeat, that Democrats did not turn on her and the Democratic National Committee. This debacle belongs to them. And people who cling to the Democrats as the only hope to stop the barbarians at the gate need to know that the Democratic Party is at fault and must be rejected. That is our only hope.
You know, Margaret, I'm so glad you said that too, because I want to remind folks, and if you don't know your history, go back and look at it. There used to be an organization that Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton and the Gores created called the Democratic Leadership Council. This was the effort to literally bring court, Wall Street America, the big financiers into leadership of the Democratic Party. Literally, the Democratic Leadership Council does not exist anymore. You know why? Because they completely took over the Democratic Party. The Democratic Leadership Council is now called the Democratic National Committee, right? Like at the end of the day, we have to be clear-headed about this. So two things very quickly. Number one, I make a big difference. I don't just say the Democrats, because I recognize that principled liberals, progressives have been lied to and sold out by the leadership of the Democratic Party, who are taking their money and their marching orders from Wall Street America, big banks, the capitalists. But so too have principled conservatives been lied to and sold out by the ruling elite of the Republican Party, who are taking their money and their marching orders from the same damn people. See, there are principled conservatives who believe in smaller government, individual freedom, etc. The one thing that scares the ruling elite is when people who look like us start to have an honest conversation around dismantling white supremacy, capitalism, patriarchy. And you know what else scares them? When somebody who looks like me goes into a pool hall or a bowling alley and talks to somebody who is not able to have this conversation, but I can basically have it, but it goes like this. I think the boss man's got his boot on our neck long enough. What do you think? And I guarantee you I will hear the most explicit anti-capitalist screed you could even imagine. They won't use the word anti-capitalist though, but they'll sure talk about the bosses. Imagine this. A multiracial movement that actually takes people where they are and educates them on the systems rather than just, the point of the spear, but the systems of exploitation and oppression. We can't help but to win.
Yes. Absolutely. And I'm going to just close with just from that, and thank you, George, for being the OG Black Panther. Also, the example of Fred Hampton organizing with the Young Patriots in a multiracial campaign and a movement to improve people's lives. And I'll just want to end with this because I'm from the internet meme generation, and so I know all about symbols. And all I want to say is, I think this discussion has taught us to look beyond symbols and look towards real solidarity and real results and real material improvements. And that is what is going to trump hate.
Power to the people.
Power
Indeed.
to the people. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Julie, and welcome to a special edition of the Green News Network, where we present Inaugurate the Resistance. I'm your host, Julie Verghese, and I'll be interviewing Lydia Camarillo of the Southwest Voter Registration Education Project based in San Antonio, Texas. Today is President Donald Trump's first official day in the White House. Throughout his campaign, he waged a war with words on immigrants, and specifically on Mexicans, Muslims, and undocumented immigrants. Lydia Camarillo is a longtime organizer and advocate for voter rights for communities of color in Texas. Since 1994, she has been the vice president of the Southwest Voter Registration Education Project. Under the leadership of Lydia and the project's president, the Latino participation in the democratic process has almost tripled. In 1994, 5.4 million Latinos were registered to vote. Now an estimated 14.3 million Latinos are registered. So Lydia, let's get right to it. So how do you see immigrants and voters of color being affected by Trump's presidency?
Well, first, let me start by thanking you for this extraordinary opportunity to visit with you and with all of you who are part of the movement to make sure that people and communities of color are treated with respect and dignity. So to your first point and the first question, I have to tell you that we're all very concerned and very worried about the new administration. This administration, given the nominees that he has presented and given all his rhetoric and words during the campaign, have demonstrated that he is outright attacking the Mexicanos, the Latino community, the Muslims, women, just about everybody that we can think of. So for us at Southwest Voter Registration Education Project, we have to begin to look at every day with the idea that we have to do two things. One, to find ways that we stop this new president from building the wall, for example, from attacking the Voting Rights Act, from attacking the Muslim community and other communities, and also finding strategies at the local level where we can make sure that we are able to move forward. For example, in the state of Texas, right now, the reason I'm not there with you in person, I'm there through this video, is because we also have legislation that is under attack in the state of Texas that is going to end the in-state tuition for the students. There's an attack on sanctuary cities. Just to give you a few of the examples, there is a surplus in our reserve budget in Texas. However, they don't want to use it for what we need, from education to building infrastructure to protecting our communities. And of course, Texas, we sued on the voter ID. So those are just a number of things that we're dealing with. Other states like California and New York, for example, can begin to introduce legislation that protects the immigrant community because, as we know, the California legislature, through the leadership of Kevin De Leon and the speaker, have indicated that they have to go through them to protect the immigrant community. So every state and at the local level, we can find ways of protecting the community. And so we have two strategies that we have to look at. What do we do before Congress and stopping this president from attacking our communities? And what can we do at the local level to make sure that we have various set of strategies as well as the marches that you all are doing?
Okay, great. So you were mentioning what might happen at the local and state level to protect voter rights and immigrant rights. Can you get a bit more into that and how your group, the Southwest Voter Registration Education Project, what kind of work you're doing with to kind of tie together the relationship between the state and local level work to protect people and your work?
Well, first of all, we think that by voting, we send a message and we can do a lot. So the first thing is increasing the number of registered voters that are Latino and other communities. And so we organize. That's one piece. The second piece is training candidates and folks to run for office who are progressive and who care about the issues. And then at the state level, if we need to, we provide recommendations on bills. For instance, there's the state of Texas the legislative session just started on last week. And so there's already a couple of bills that we think are going to help. For instance, we want to make sure that you can register on the same day as Election Day, which is a very important move. Colorado and other states have that, and it's very, very important. We also want to make sure that we have the opportunity to vote in other precincts, so that if you're working on Election Day and you're in another area, you can go in and register, vote. So there's a couple of bills that are very, very important that we're moving forward to make sure we do that. But we're still also fighting the voter ID. We not only believe that the voter ID violates the voting rights of 800,000 people in Texas, including white women who do not have documents. We found that a lot of the women that became nuns don't have those documentation. So it doesn't only affect the African American community, the Muslim community, and Latinos, but it affects all of us. So we sued. Unfortunately, before the Supreme Court in the Shelby ruling, they indicated that Section 4 of that ruling does no longer exist until the Congress reinstates it. So the voter ID was found before the federal court to be unconstitutional and violating our rights. And however, because the Shelby ruling, it was re-implemented and reinstated. So we are in the process of finding and working with the courts to make sure that they fix that. And we see the voter ID impacting and affecting people in various states, whether it's in Alabama, in Indiana, and in other states. So we are going to be looking at finding those issues. So there's 2 points. There's finding ways of stopping legislation that is regressive and attacks our communities and dilutes the vote, as well as finding legislation that promotes it, like same-day voter registration, same-day, or also, if we can't do that, the state of Texas, for instance, has voter registration 30 days out from election. We know that most people pay attention on elections 2 weeks out, so we need to move the elections. In fact, the state of California, there was a time when it was registered to vote 30 days out, like Texas and other states like New Mexico. However, they moved their registration deadline, and that helped to increase because, as we all know, in national elections, we're all paying attention. But in midterm elections and local elections, it's really 5 to 7 days to 10 days out when we're paying attention. So if you move the voter registration date, that helps a lot. So those are some of the things we're working on.
That sounds great. So then how can people on the ground who are not members of a group like yours or not, involved in any way, if they wanted to get involved and protect their own rights and protect the rights of their neighbors, how could they organize themselves today to effectively combat what Trump had said he'd do regarding detentions and deportations and, suppressing the vote?
Well, we know that this next session is going to be extraordinarily difficult because the President Obama signed an executive order for the DACA. DAPA. DACA is for the students, the DAPA is for the parents. We believe that the next president, Trump, is going to eliminate that executive order, which means that 750,000 young men and women and their families are at risk because they signed on to DAPA, which allowed them to come forward, work, pay taxes, and so they know where they live. They can find them. So that is the first order for us to find a way of protecting these young men and women. There is already a legislative bill before Congress to try to protect them called the Bridge Act. And so we have to make sure that it allows for these young men and women to be protected. It's a bipartisan effort. So one of the ways you can help is calling and making sure that this bill does not allow for militarizing the border, does not allow for building the wall, because we believe that building the wall is really a symbol and an attack on the communities of color. You notice we're not having a building the wall north in Canada. We're building the wall in the south, donde estamos prietitos y morenos. So we have to make sure that that's one of the ways is that you fight the wall. We have a campaign in Southwest Border called "Fight the Wall, Register Mexican to Vote," and so you can either call your members of Congress at the various levels and look to see in your communities whether you're a blue state or a red state or a purple state how you can either move forward progress or stop bills that are bad, and then at the national level before Congress is look at this bill, the Bridge Act, and see if it makes sense for you and if it's still controversial because it's still including pieces that militarize the bill. Ask that it be dumped and that we protect the DACA students and their families. That's just one example.
Okay, well, Thank you. That sounds great. Thank you so much, Lydia, for coming on to the Green News Network. And to the audience, again, my name is Julie Verghese with GNN. I thank you for watching and for participating in this special live stream to inaugurate the resistance. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a beautiful day.
You too.
Hi, I'm Melina Abdullah with Black Lives Matter, and today is a horrible day in the history of this country and the history of the world. We just inaugurated a president. It was hard for me to even mouth that, right? Who represents everything that is wrong with the world. He's a fascist, he's a racist, he's a sexist, he's a homophobe, xenophobe, and we know that this is coming, but we also know that there's a legacy of resistance that we inherit. So Black people have always resisted. We've never submitted to our own oppression. So we can think about how we got free from slavery, how we ushered in the anti-lynching movement, how we stopped Jim Crow, how we stood up for Black power. And so what we're compelled to do in this moment, this is an iteration of a legacy of Black struggle that we inherited. That's what Black Lives Matter is. And today we are committing to redouble our effort. We're going to continue to fight, and we're going to fight with renewed vigor. And so Patrice, a co-founder of Black Lives Matter, is here with us, and she's going to talk about what we did today. Hundreds of us stood up in Los Angeles and are standing up around the country.
Good evening, everybody. By now, you have seen the protests around the country. You've seen the successful protests blocking checkpoints at the inauguration today. You have seen groups and individuals and people say, we will not allow this person to represent us as president. We here in Los Angeles, Black Lives Matter LA, Black Lives Matter Long Beach, Los Angeles Community Action Network, Youth Justice Coalition, and many more organizations teamed up, and we drove around the county. We drove in the name of freedom. We drove in the name of resistance, and our first stop was the LA County jails, where we stopped where we were able to shut down the streets, where we were able to really push forward a conversation, push forward a demand around abolishing jails and prisons, that they represent an archaic system, and they represent the soon-to-be Attorney General Sessions, who in 1955 prosecuted 3 civil rights activists. We know that they're coming after us. We know that we have to stand up and fight back. The second place we went to was the soon-to-be Secretary of Treasury, Steven Mnuchin's home in the bastion of wealth. We went to his home, hundreds of us, and we challenged and we pushed. How can we allow for someone to be a Secretary of Treasury who displaced poor people over and over and over again? We are now here in Lamert Park. You're listening to live music, because even though today is a horrible day, we still have to celebrate our resistance, our power, the power of the people.
And when we struggle, we win. We struggle, we win, right? So the struggle ended slavery. The struggle ended that phase of lynching. The struggle ended Jim Crow. The struggle brought Black power. The struggle will win our freedom, and we are committed to struggling. Thank you to our comrades. Thank you to Jill Stein, Ajamu Baraka, for having this teach-in. We're remembering that the people always win when we struggle.
Yes, we do. Thank you.
Great. Glad to see folks. Glad you're here. We have joining us remotely Mohammed Malik, who's in Miami. Mohammed, welcome.
Thank you.
All right. And Daryl Moak, who's here. I'm George Friday, and we're going to be talking about racial justice organizing. Mohammed, I want to hear from you first. Give me an idea of the kind of racial justice organizing that you think is important going forward and what you might be involved with right now.
Yeah, so I think in the Trump era, thanks for inviting me, by the way, to the panel. The day after this inauguration, it's important for us to kind of reflect on both the work that's been happening in organizing for racial justice prior to today, and also kind of the type of organizing that we'll have to face and try to develop, as Trump begins to put out his policies. So I think the set of challenges that, we need to kind of investigate are, there's a multitude of these sort of challenges. And I think there's a lot of opportunities. And I think depending on where you are in the country, there's different things that you can do. In Florida, for example, one of the things that we have been working on racial justice is trying to address mass incarceration, school-to-prison pipeline, and also particularly the Jim Crow disfranchisement, voter disfranchisement, which has impacted over 1.6 million people, predominantly, I'd say, disproportionately African-American, poor people of color, including Latinos. And I think that, in Florida, for example, we have an opportunity, I think, despite of or in spite of the Trump kind of environment, to push that forward. So a number of us, the sort of lead of this is the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition. It's a coalition of civil rights organizations across the state of Florida. Within this kind of work, this anti-Jim Crow work, there are a number of people who are involved. You have African-American groups, the sort of like more traditional church-based groups. You have civil rights groups, you have socialists, you have all sorts of people who are involved in this kind of struggle. And I think that one of the things we're looking toward in the next 2 years is we're very excited to sort of take the leadership of people who are disfranchised themselves, that is formerly incarcerated individuals in Florida who have been stripped of their right to vote, sit on the jury, and run for public office, in addition to losing their ability to get a lot of forms of employment that require licenses. We're really proud and excited that this work is being led by people who are directly impacted. In fact, very soon from today, there will be people who are disfranchised across Florida who will be gathering to sort of organize, do political education, and kind of get ready for a day after March, which is coming soon, in which the Florida Supreme Court will be sort of reviewing and kind of giving its judgment on the petition language. And soon, I think, we'll be sort of, a lot of us across the state of Florida will be focusing on trying to get an amendment to the Constitution, which will reinforce a right to vote for a large majority of those 1.6 million who have been disfranchised. So I think, the Trump era has certainly scared a lot of people. It's certainly created a lot of concern for obvious reasons. But I think in Florida, what a lot of us are focusing on is democracy itself. And what can we actually do here right now in the next few weeks, the next few months, the next few years in order to advance, the rights of people across the state, particularly those who are often totally undermined by Democrats and Republicans and totally ignored. So that's definitely one aspect of racial justice organizing that I think many of us in Florida are going to focus on. And then, of course, there's other forms of organizing that groups such as Dream Defenders, such as Power U, Center for Social Change. There's a lot of other groups that will be organizing younger folks. What I like about the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition, and that work is not only that it's led by directly impacted people, but also that it's intergenerational and it's multiracial in conception. I also think that this is going to be one of the important aspects to racial justice organizing, is ensuring that we're learning from our ancestors in the past, folks from, I'm not just talking about the 60s, maybe even the 30s as well and prior, who have given us a lot of lessons, really understanding the history of what Confederacy means, what racism means, how that intersects with this capitalist system, and how racism and capitalism intersect. I think a lot of these understandings are going to once again come to the fore in our organizing. The intergenerational aspect for me is also exciting, and in some ways, though a lot of people are sad or mourning, I'm sort of in a different mindset. I'm really hyped up and just sort of ready to get to work.
That's good. We really need that kind of energy. And it is important to let folks know that racial justice work isn't new. There are legacies of people and lessons to build on, and that actually helps us and gives us strength and power. Daryl, tell us a little bit about both what you see going forward and how we do build on those legacies.
You know, one of the things I wanted to point out, you and Muhammad were both saying just now, is that racial justice building isn't only about folks that are people of color. So this isn't an issue that only people of color should be leading the charge on, but should be in key leadership positions of, right? So you want to make sure that in terms of going forward, that you have communities of color represented around the table, but that also folks that are in non-communities of color, where racial justice is important, that they're recognizing where their stuff is, right? So you've got to do your own work to know how you can build with folks, and also the things that you may do that may be sort of what we'll call microaggressions or micro-learned behaviors, right? That you don't have any intention on being a distraction or creating a rift, but there are things that are done that in some ways do it anyway. And so we've all learned from the same, let's call it the same master plan, if you will. And so we've all been operating from that same playbook. So it would be irresponsible for any one of us to think that we are no longer affected by that playbook, right? And so whether you're in communities of color or whether you're in other communities, recognizing that that playbook is still impacting you in the way that you perceive things, the way that you interact with people, and what you do with them. And so we've got to be able to go beyond that, and first recognizing it so that we can go beyond it. I think there's some key things that we need to do going forward. There are several. One is visibility, raising visibility, mobilization, leadership transformation and leadership transitioning, and also coalition building. But the biggest issue of that is a clarity around our message, right? Okay. So as we're building visibility, we've got to be able to go to folks and say, we have an alternate plan. We have an alternate vision. We have something that incorporates what's important to you so that we can build together, right? So it isn't that it's new. It isn't that the Green Party has something brand new to offer. What we're saying is that we're looking at the playbook and we're throwing it out. We're saying that old way of doing things doesn't work, and what will work is when we all come together. That's in these coalitions, knowing that we don't have all the answers alone, but also honoring and respecting that there have been other groups out there doing this work for a really long time, and that we can't come into the room and say, hey, we got the room, so come on in, and we've set an agenda, and now we want you to participate in this agenda, and then do that thing we do in meetings and say, does anyone have something to want to add to the agenda? You know, but when we come to the room, we need to say, okay, what shall our agenda be? We know that these are the issues. These are the core issues that we all can recognize. Are there others? Let's all get those on the table. And now how do we attack this? What does the agenda need to be set? And who's going to do what part of it, right? So that there are parts that each of us can naturally do better than others, and we've got to give room for that and allow that to be the case. We've got to organize. We've got to mobilize people. We've got to get the message really clear about who we are, what we're standing for. The reality that we know on the street is that people resonate with the messages that we bring. They resonate with our candidates. They resonate with our issues. What they don't resonate with is believing that the vote for our candidate is going to translate into power in their hands. Right. And that's the biggest challenge. And so we've got to begin to show the scenarios. We've got to do the mock-ups. We've got to prove to people that if you do these things and these things, there's a domino effect on this. And so we've got to build from that perspective. And so it's really it's a public relations campaign. It's we are a better alternative. We do have better candidates, and we intend to do exactly what we said. Now here's the other challenge we have, is that we have to have a strategic plan. What do we do when we get folks elected into offices when they are one or two or a few amongst many, and they're going to have to caucus with someone? So our party has to be willing to recognize what politics is about. It has to do with some of it. Sometimes there's some nuancing, right? And it's not that I'm going to only get what I want and I'm not going to play if I don't get what I want. It's that I want to move us in a direction. Our country is not going to turn from its racist, misogynist, chauvinistic, oppressive ways simply because we're elected. Even if we had elected a Green president, it would not change the very culture and nature of this country in and of itself. That is going to be a process that we're going to have to work through and massage for a while now. It's been here for a while. It's going to take us a minute, maybe not as long to get rid of, hopefully, but it will take us a little while. So we've got to be ready to do incremental steps that move us in the right direction, that are clearly moving us in the direction that we want to go versus other directions. And so
Absolutely.
This kind of organizing and mobilizing and coalition building and leadership structure has to be one that says we're recognizing that there are dominant and different views, dominant, subdominant, different, divergent views that all have to be heard, all have to be respected.
And that takes work. Building that coalition, building that relationship, following the lead of the most effective people, and making sure racial justice is an active work that you're doing.
Right, because you can't come into my neighborhood and tell me how to organize in my neighborhood.
That's right.
You can come into my neighborhood and say, hey, what do we do? I want to meet some folks in your neighborhood. Can you take me? Can you introduce me? Can you bring me with you?
That's it.
As opposed to saying, well, we've been doing this for a long time. That's a problem that some of our colleagues in the union movement had at times, is that they walk in saying, well, we've
got the answers.
and we know how to do this. So we're going to come and show up and we're going to bring it into your community and do it for you. And they learned that you really do have to work with the existing community, the existing gatekeepers that are in that community, and how do you navigate and move around that, and how do you gain trust, especially when you show up and you look like the one that had been doing the oppression before.
That's right.
So you can't look that way, or you sound like them. Even if you may be my skinfolk, you may not sound like my kinfolk. So at sometimes we kind of have to nuance and work through some of those differences, because it is understanding that we do have varying viewpoints that really make a difference.
Yes. Often it's about recognizing and ceding leadership and transferring power more than it is about taking the lead. So I wanted to find out what you would say to someone who says, I really believe in racial justice, I want to work for racial justice, but there are no people of color where I live. Mohammed, what would you say to somebody like that?
Yeah, I think that, like, there's different approaches that people have. I would say that, there was a famous kind of interaction that Malcolm X had with a white person who asked him once, how can I help, right? And I think the advice that he gave to this young lady, I believe she was a student, so many years ago, is actually still relevant today.
It is.
Essentially, the advice was, go into your own communities and talk to them, right? So I think it's totally something that not just white people could do, but we all can do. Because even though there's issues of racial justice between communities, there's also internal dynamics and issues within our communities. So I think that, that would mean, for example, me as a Muslim man going inside my own community as a Muslim man and trying to bring some brothers together to talk about patriarchy in the ways that we can. That means that, for example, white folks, and there's been white folks who have done this, and I think with mixed results, but I always think it's important to try, to begin to organize and talk, have conversations and begin to try to become educated and organize amongst themselves to try to tackle white supremacy from within their own ranks. So I think there's various ways in which each of us, depending on our particular social position, can be of use to the larger movement. And I think that white people can, if, for example, they don't have people of color who are living in the communities, there are a variety of ways that they can support, either by bringing together people within their communities or their churches, for example, to leverage their institutional resources in support of racial justice.
That's right.
That could be a way of supporting. You may not be able to, you're not going to lead the movement, but you can certainly say, I have this bus, if you need transportation, I have this money, I have this venue, etc. And I also think that, there are ways in which whites can organize within their own institutions to again leverage resources, but also ensure that at minimum they're doing no harm. So that is to say, if you can't proactively provide something directly, like a resource or something like that, or support, another way of sort of supporting from, I believe, that social position might be that if there's a particular negative behavior or action or words or statements or whatever that are coming from institutions that are majority white, to try to get inside that situation and stop that harm. So I think that those are some ideas I have. I'm sure others have some other ideas as well from their experience.
Thanks so much, Malik. We're going to be closing soon, and Daryl Moak, who's the co-chair of the Green Party, in terms of building resistance, what would be your closing comments or recommendations to our viewers?
I think we can talk about building resistance, or we can talk about building power and building a way forward. And I think I like to talk more about what I want versus what I'm against, because I can fight longer for what I want than for what I'm against, and I can be empowered by that. So I think that Muhammad has made some really great points. I think we go to your communities, speak to them, do what you can do to do anti-racist work, anti-sexist work, anti-homophobic work, anti-whatever, to really address your own held beliefs, the things that you have been operating from that you may not really even know that are there, right? Do that work and then begin to build relationships with people on other sides so that you then begin to have dialogue and conversation, and honest dialogue and conversation about, these were my stereotypes, these were my prejudices, these were what I believed, and now I'm beginning to learn something different. And so I want you to be open to my making a mistake, my saying it wrong, my doing it wrong, from a place of love, correcting me so that we can figure out how to do this thing better together, right? So it doesn't mean that non-folks of color will not make any mistakes in what they say or in how they say it, right? But it's recognizing that the attempt is being made to do something different. At the same time, it means that within our collective communities as well, is that we have to be willing to open the doors and share and have the handout as well. So it goes both ways. Folks have to go and do their work to be able to move it. So as a party, lots of folks have to go and do their work. And even if you say, I'm a progressive, I'm a liberal, I vote this way all the time, and I support all these things, that's not enough to say that in your personal experience with other people, that some of that other stuff doesn't show up. You've got to be open to hearing it when it shows up and talking about it and talking through it. I heard you say something earlier about today in a different conversation about having the conversation, what happens when we mess up? Before we mess up, how are we going to stay in it with each other? How are we going to work together with each other? How are we going to stay strong with each other when you're on the other side of an idea that I think is different, right? And so where the frustrations may lie. So I think we've got to be able to do that. We've got to be able to talk to each other. We've got to be able to come to consensus on how we want to move forward and build a plan and pathway forward together. We cannot do it individually. We cannot do it on our own. This movement is bigger than us and will last longer than we will be here unless we can come together and make these changes happen, which I believe we can do in the lifetime that I have left, right? And so I really think it's possible.
It's absolutely possible, and it starts with you. It's every day. I often tell folks racial justice work is the rest of your life, so give yourself and other people a break, and you're going to be all right. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.
Power to the people.
All right, thank you.
Right on.
Take care.
All right.
My greetings to the Inaugurate the Resistance Forum. I'm Dr. Jack Rasmus. The message I'd like to leave you is the following. Republicans are know-nothings. Democrats are do-nothings. Vote or support nothing, and that's what you're going to get, or even less than nothing. And that's the story of the last 40 years. Republicans come in and wreck the economy and make the rich richer. Democrats come in, they revive the economy and make their rich friends even richer. And we're all left behind. The proof of this is simply 95% of all the national income created since 2009 under Obama went to the wealthiest 1%. 65% went to under George W. Bush went to the wealthy 1%, and under Clinton, 48%. We must change. We must have independent politics. You cannot reform the Democratic Party. All this talk of inside strategy, outside strategy with regard to the Democratic Party is a dead end. Just look at what happened to Bernie Sanders. What did they do to him during the election? We all know that story. And then he still says, well, let's go to the Democratic Party convention and change the platform. What happened there? And then after the election, he says, well, let's take over the leadership of the Democratic Party and push Keith Ellison. And again, he gets slapped down. How many times do you have to get slapped down to realize who your friends are? The Democratic Party cannot be reformed. It's a wing of the corporate party of America, run by the Democratic Leadership Conference, that now is the power in that party and will not give up control. We have to outgrow identity politics, and we have to integrate it with economic issues. The key problem is not conditions. It's not that people don't want to change. The problem today is organization. We need to do the following tasks in the coming year. One, we must grow grassroots movements, integrate class economic issues with minority issues and civil liberties issues. We must unite these grassroots movements, develop cross-movement support actions. We must outgrow single issueism. Streams of single issues are easily blocked or they dry up. What we need is to bring these issues together in a river of resistance. And then we must form a new political party. Our target should be in the coming year, a year from now, to have a founding convention of a new party based on these grassroots movements, not a party called by intellectuals or academics, but by real leaders of real movements and real organizations. But the people of these movements must outgrow single issueism. They must know they can no longer be big fish in a little pond, but have to give up to be a part of this river of resistance. Go to my blog, jackrasmus.com, where I'll be writing a lot this year, as I have been over the previous year, on Trump policies and what's coming. We are going to face a crisis and instability like we've never faced before. It's going to be a very interesting year. If you wish to find out my analysis of what's going on, go to jackrasmus.com.
Pueblo, pueblo, people, my people, canta tu ca.
My greetings to the Inaugurate the Resistance Forum. I'm Dr. Jack Rasmus. The message I'd like to leave you is
Pueblo, pueblo, people, my people, canta tu canción, sing your song, oh, tell your story, sing your song. Hi, my name is Francisco Herrera. I'm here in San Francisco, California. Greetings to all of you gathering. I'm sending a message as I was asked to communicate. We ran for mayor. We had a campaign here in November 2015 where a few of us created an alliance and ran choice voting. We're able to bring down the mayor with his $1.5 million down to a miserable 51% of the vote, crawling in the back room window. Personally, I was able to run as a Green, and which I've been voting as a Green for 2 decades at least, and got 32% of the vote when all the votes were counted. Then last year in 2016, ran for supervisor, District 11, here, got 3,000 votes. We're able to start building a base with both of those campaigns, a people-to-people alliance, civic alliance across the city, across the region actually, where we're looking at issues that are basic to our communities, that have to do with affordable housing, that has to do with education for ourselves and our youth, our kids, has to do with health, access with quality health, living wages, a bank of the city, all of this, calling it a peace economy that is based on peacemaking rather than war. We're working together across party alliances across religious lines, across ethnic lines, from different groups, diverse areas of the city, diverse areas of the region, to make decisions and really applying very basic instruments like culture. The labor movement of 100 years ago, the civil rights movement of 50, 60 years ago, all were so successful because they sang together, they had picnics, they had dances. That's what we got to come back to, the use of our culture as working people, and be proud of being working class. We have to be proud again of being the working class.
Hey everyone, this is Gloria Matera. I was a deputy campaign manager for the Stein Baraka campaign and currently co-chair of the Green Party of New York State. And I'm here with Margaret Flowers.
And I was a U.S. Senate candidate in Maryland on the Green Party ticket in 2016, and very excited to be part of this effort, a big supporter of the Stein Baraka campaign.
So we're here. Our segment is really talking about women's issues, feminism, organizing around that. And first, we first have to give a big shout out to our sisters, green, red, old and young, and moms, with their partners, with their babies, with their families who are out there marching right now. It's hard to be here and not there, but we want to lift up what's the issues that they're marching for. And we know that that takes on a lot of different phases. People are out there around reproductive rights. It's really sad that women are still have to be out there in the streets fighting for that right to continue. And there are lots of other issues. Women are marching for lots of different reasons. And obviously, I think a big impetus of that were some of the statements made by Donald Trump during his campaign and the concern about what's going to happen with a fairly conservative, Republican-led government. And so we want to talk about those issues and what the Green Party stands for and the importance of the movement. Margaret, you want to say anything specific on the march or?
Well, I likewise support the women that are out there today in the march, and a lot of my friends are out there marching. But this is a really critical issue because what Donald Trump is doing is he's kind of reinforcing these cultural norms that exist that women have been fighting against for such a long time. And when I was out marching yesterday and encountered some of the people that were there to support President Trump, was hearing that similar kind of language, being things that weren't really appropriate to be saying out in public. They felt very comfortable saying. So I feel like that women are right in feeling that this is driving us in an opposite direction from where we need to go. And it's really critical that we unite and fight around these issues. And the Green Party platform, if you haven't read it, check it out. It's such a strong platform, such a socially justice-minded platform that it's really important to check out.
Right. And we also want to say that there are obviously, I think, two lines of struggle here, and they go together, obviously, to continue for the women's movement struggles in the past that we may remember more, but still we're talking about reproductive rights, we're talking about equal pay, things that have been talked about before. Gains have been made, of course, but I think there's a concern. There's gains not have been made enough.
Right.
So while there is justifiable concern about what this new administration might be doing to roll certain women's rights back, we can just make sure we remember that women have not been brought up to equal status in many ways through the Democratic Party administrations before that. And that while those single issues are very important for us to be visible about, and that's happening right now out in the streets, that there are kind of deeper issues, systemic issues that the Green Party is willing to take on that we don't think are talked about. When Hillary Clinton says, an equal pay for equal work, that of course is a rousing cry for women to be excited about and inspired about. But when you are a candidate, when you are an administration, when you are in a party that takes actions like war, like military domination, like the corporations becoming more important than people, then you are not really addressing the issues that will be lifting up women in a true comprehensive way. When single mothers are the ones in poverty, where white women and then black women and then brown, Latino women are getting less and less and less pay, then we are not taking care of the 25% of those children living in poverty if we are in a system that is dominated by corporate greed.
Right. And the United States, as many people are probably aware, of the industrialized nations, we have the highest rates of child poverty, and even our maternal mortality, so mothers giving birth and dying as a result of that birth, is very high compared to other industrialized nations. We do not have a guaranteed right for women who are pregnant to receive prenatal care even. And many other nations do provide prenatal care regardless of your income status. So we do have a lot of ways to go, and I think equity is a word that we need to be discussing more and more, because it's not just about giving women equal rights, but it's understanding that the system that we live in has created disparities so that women are much less likely to own a home than men, and that's a source of wealth that people have that can be passed on through generations. So generationally, women have been disadvantaged, and so we really need to be talking about programs like, it's not just equal wage, but preferred mortgages to get a home, or assistance with owning a home, or lower interest rates, also affording education. It's universal child care so that women can have the liberty to do the things that they want to do for themselves, go to work or go to school. So these are a lot of things that the Green Party fights for, and that, as you said, these struggles, we had not achieved what we wanted to achieve. So while this is a setback, we know that we're constantly fighting for these rights.
That's right, Margaret. That's really well said. And we know the backsliding that was caused by the Bill Clinton administration's basically gutting aid to women and dependent children, temporary assistance, and this welfare reform, which I saw in New York City, this welfare to work, giving women inadequate, unsafe childcare for their children while they were out doing kind of meaningless work that was not going to get them into the workforce, was not going to lift them up in terms of their income. That's the kinds of thing, the systemic change the Green Party is fighting for in terms of, economic democracy, treating everyone equal. Whether it's women of color. We want to work towards eradicating the kind of poverty and the kinds of oppression that women continue to suffer, even if this government or the government, before that or down the road is going to pass some laws that obviously will make a difference, different sections of women, but it's not going to be a real change for women and children in this country, and then therefore around the world, because the U.S. the policies of the United States really have a detrimental, a life-threatening effect on women and children around the world.
Absolutely. And New York City has actually made some progress on that front. New York is one of the cities that is actually investing actively in cooperative businesses and providing technical resources. So when we talk about economic democracy, building worker-owned cooperatives is one piece of that. And women who have worked in service industries, cleaning homes, taking care of people who have medical needs at home, have been able to form cooperatives so that now they're having both a living wage but also have control over their workplace and can make decisions. And that's the kind of empowerment that we need to have going forward. Also, I think that the health issues are really critical because women have greater health needs than men because we bear children, and that has not been respected in our health system. And the whole concept of the United States, we practice what I call body part medicine, where instead of covering the whole person, we decide, you can have health care, but not for your ears, not for your eyes, not for reproductive uses. That has to change. We have to realize that when we're fighting for a healthcare system for everybody, we're both fighting for comprehensive health care, but also fighting to return the right to decide, to make medical decisions to women and their health professionals to have the right to have control over their own bodies.
Great. Thank you, Margaret, for making that connection. Margaret and I are both in
That's
healthcare.
right.
Margaret as a physician and myself working more kind of in the counseling end, mostly for immigrant families, women and children primarily. And so we really understand the importance of healthcare justice and what that will do to really improve and change the lives of women and then therefore children. And you know, we can't say enough about the fact that the Green Party continues to join with single-payer advocates to talk about healthcare justice. You know, obviously, a single-payer system, a Medicare for all system, is what makes the most sense, but also then looking at the issues of justice and equity and accessibility. We know that there is a big healthcare fight going on, and people are kind of gearing up for that. We just want to say, of course, we don't think the American people should be left without any coverage, but the idea, and probably Margaret and Jill may have touched on this earlier, but we are not going to go into the defense of the Affordable Care Act because that has not really improved health care for the majority of people in this country, particularly women and children.
Yeah, during my campaign, I met one mother who has 3 children, and under the Affordable Care Act, her premium went up 60%, and her copays and deductibles went up. And you know, so it's not a solution. It's actually further privatizing our health care. We need to create a health care system that everybody is in. Everybody has the same access to a high-quality, comprehensive care. How do you see kind of the cultural aspect of this? Because the Green Party has always been a party that has not just spoken out for women's issues, but kind of against the whole systemic, cultural, patriarchal system that we're in.
That's true. And I think the Green Party in practice, in terms of how we elect our leadership, how we bring our candidates forward to run for office, and the positions we take, that we have really moved away from patriarchy in our political party, and that's something that we think is another big piece of making systemic change here, which is culturally, you know, the white privileged male being in charge, being in leadership, making the decisions, writing the laws, is not going to be what's going to lift up women and children. And I think when women are equal in the leadership and making decisions, that will be a definite change for the better in this country.
And that has been shown around the world, too, where there are other countries that have developed greater female leadership. And it shows, and it's reflected in the policies that go forward. We need to have, you know, greater collaboration and greater voices of those who are impacted having a say in the policies that are put forward. So if you're not already a Green Party supporter, it's important. You know, this is another kind of area that really distinguishes the Green Party from the other 2 kind of corporate-dominated parties. That we're really trying to not just put forward policies, but to really walk the walk of the way that we envision society being more just, sustainable, and democratic and peaceful.
Great. And I want to thank Margaret for talking about this topic with me. I want to give another shout out to the women and their children and their partners and their family members that are out marching today. We really salute them for coming here from many different places to be together, because the power in the streets is what's really important, along with this amazing Green News Network that's getting the word out to people. And we want to give a shout out to our crew that's been doing amazing work and will continue to let people know that we are nearing the end of our Facebook lifetime limit. So we are going to close the live stream after this segment, but don't go away, because we are going to restart the stream for the second half of Inaugurate the Resistance right here on the Green News Network, Facebook.com/Dr. Jill Stein, Dr. Jill Stein. So stay tuned for that coming up in just a short time later this afternoon.